Okay, good evening, everybody. If you could please begin to take your seats. We're going to start in about a minute. Thank you.
With quorum.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. The second night of our local bill hearings for the 2017 session. We appreciate you coming. We've got 13 bills, I believe, tonight, and 15 people signed up to testify. So that's great. That's more than Monday, but we're going to try to keep it moving. We're allowing organizations to testify for 3 minutes and individuals for 2, and then there will be questions if members want to ask questions and not hold them until they get to Annapolis. And we will start with the Education Subcommittee chaired by Bonnie Cullison. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Bonnie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Delegate Barkley. The first bill of the evening is Family Life and Human Sexuality Curriculum, Affirmative Consent, be presented to us by Delegates Ariana Kelly and Maricé Morales, and I would also like to call to the table Maeve Sanford Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the delegation for considering MC 1417. This bill would require that affirmative consent instruction be part of the family life and human sexuality curriculum in grades 7 and 10 in Montgomery County schools. This legislation is intended to prevent sexual assault, which is something that has been in the headlines both locally and nationally this year, unfortunately. I know you've seen multiple news stories, and many of us are working on this issue in many different ways. This bill intends to sort of fill a critical hole that is missing. We're missing an opportunity right now to prevent the assaults before they occur. If you look at my written testimony, you'll see some very startling and disturbing statistics. I'll read you a few of them. My written testimony is long. I will not read the whole thing. But a 2001 AAUW study found that 58% of girls in 7th to 12th grade are sexually harassed in schools. And 13% of girls in 7th through 12th grade are touched in unwelcome sexual ways in school. Another study found that 53% of girls are sexually assaulted by a peer. 39% of these sexual assaults took place at school. The National Survey of Teen Relationships and Intimate Violence found that nearly 20% of boys and girls report being sexually abused in their relationships. And tragically, unfortunately, and really what is driving this legislation is the fact that 1 in 8 high school girls have been raped. 1 in 8. According to the CDC's National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, 42% of female rape victims are first raped before the age of 18. I know from my tenure as executive director at NARAL Pro-Choice Maryland that the history and politics around sexual education is incredibly complex. I know that we have a local process in place that is mandated by state law that works well for developing the specifics of the sex ed curriculum here, locally, with local community stakeholders. This proposal is consistent with that current system. It allows for local control of the specific curriculum development. I know this is a concern you're going to hear about from the Board of Education and is in their letter of opposition. I do think that that can be clarified and we can work with that. I realize that that is an important concern and our local stakeholders' voices are critically important as we would develop this curriculum. You can see we have many Montgomery County organizations here in support of this idea, and they're among the local stakeholders we hope will actually help put this idea into practice, put the leaves on the tree, the meat on the bones of the curriculum in cooperation with the Board of Education. It is standard practice to have state law set the broad strokes of requirements for sexuality education. That's what this legislation does. It elevates the idea of teaching consent to be on the same plane as the other things that we are already requiring in state law. That is, that we have sex ed, that it teach pregnancy prevention, that it teach STD prevention, and HIV/AIDS prevention. Those are things that state law already requires. I am asking that we also require consent be taught here in Montgomery County. It is my belief, and I think shared by many of us, that teaching consent is fundamental and an obligation. The other point of opposition that you will hear is from the Board of Education is that 7th grade would not be an appropriate time to teach this. I'm just going to read from their letter very briefly. It says the 7th grade curriculum as it relates to sexual activity focuses on waiting to engage in sexual activity, peer pressure, and the potential consequences of sexual activity. As such, affirmative consent at this level would not be applicable or appropriate. I have tremendous respect for my colleagues on the board, but with that statement, I fundamentally disagree. I think that is exactly the right time to be teaching affirmative consent. You can also see in my packet of my testimony, as the parent of a 7th grader, I have the opportunity to go in and review the sex ed curriculum, which I did. I took some pictures of it. I'm sure they would have definitely shared it with me, but I shared you the photographs because that's what I had readily available. But you can see in the curriculum that currently exists in 7th grade, we're already talking about condom use and STDs. We're already talking about gender identity. We're already talking about HIV and AIDS. It's critically important that we introduce the concept of consent early. It's what all the data shows. I shared with you a sheet called Waiting. It's sort of the abstinence-based part of this curriculum. And again, you could see how it would be very easy to introduce the idea of consent into these abstinence-based themes. We list all sorts of reasons why one might wait. But one of the reasons we don't list right now is that you should wait because your partner does not consent. That's a really good reason to wait. We list all sorts of physical and emotional and social consequences for sexual activity in our 7th grade curriculum. Lots of different consequences. You could get an STD, you could get pregnant, you could be infertile, you could get cervical cancer, you could lose trust by your parents, you could get low self-esteem, you could lose your self-respect, you could no longer focus in school, you could feel used, you could give up your social life, you could get a bad reputation, you could have a lifetime of poverty. All of those consequences are included currently in our 7th grade curriculum. But we don't include the consequence that, oh my goodness, if you forget to get consent, you could be causing short and long-term psychological effects for your intended partner. We don't include that in our curriculum right now, and we should. We don't include that if you don't get consent, you could be risking jail time. You could be risking being expelled from school. You could be risking a lifetime as a sex offender on a registry. I think it's really important that we include those potential consequences as we're teaching our children about sexuality. I think we do a really great job here in Montgomery County with our sex ed curriculum. I'm really proud of the work that our community stakeholders have done in putting it together. I'm simply asking that we also include the idea of consent in 7th and 10th grade because I think talking about consent needs to come first. Delegate Morales is going to further discuss the 10th grade curriculum and some other reasons why this bill is critically important. And then you'll hear from my daughter Maeve, who's going to tell us a little bit about what 7th grade is really like. I do urge your support, and I look forward to working together collaboratively with the Board of Education and all of the other stakeholders and finding a way to address this problem. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the delegation. And I wanted to thank my colleague, Delegate Ariana Kelly, for introducing this bill and for allowing me to support her in any way that I can. Like Delegate Kelly, I am very concerned that we're not doing enough to change the culture. And I do want to commend the Board of Ed for being collaborative from the beginning. And this is just really an invitation to collaborate and, like Delegate Kelly said, to go to the experts and to improve the curriculum in areas that we have identified. Obviously, I'm in support of MC 1417. Sexual assault on college campuses has been at the forefront of national news recently. The issue has garnered national attention in part thanks to documentaries such as The Hunting Ground and the White House's It's On Us campaign. Some colleges and universities across the country have worked on addressing this issue on their campuses. Changes at the collegiate level are a step in the right direction. However, college should not be the first time students are getting education to prevent rape and sexual assault. In Montgomery County, the number of reported rapes rose more than 100% from 2014 to 2015. In 2015, there were 259 rapes reported and 19 attempted rapes. And of those 259 rapes, 70% were acquaintance rapes. Studies show that while a small percentage of the population, rapists tend to be repeat offenders. These repeat offenders average 6 rapes in their lifetime. If we educate our youth on the importance of mutual respect and seeking consent before pursuing a sexual act, we can reduce the number of rapists in the future. It is time to acknowledge that we live in a rape culture, a culture that shamelessly blames victims for being raped, a culture that instead of teaching individuals to not be raped, teaches victims what they need to do to prevent sexual assaults from happening to them. A culture in which 60% of high school boys find it acceptable to force sex on a girl in some circumstances. A culture in which 1 in 20 sexually harassed girls will switch schools in each year because of it. A culture in which 1 in 5 high school girls say they've been sexually assaulted at school. And this has got to change. And fortunately, we can do that by altering the MCPS curriculum, the 10th grade and 7th grade sexual education curriculum. High school presents the best window of opportunity to curb the boys will be boys narrative. Young men and women going through puberty are forming their ideas, behaviors, and beliefs about sex at this time in their lives. Programs to teach affirmative consent are most effective early on while these behaviors are still forming. College students don't just go to college and start sexually harassing their peers. These behaviors have been forming since their middle and high school years. As it stands, MCPS has their family life and human sexuality curriculum in grades 7 and 10. The curriculum currently includes the concept of consent versus coercion. However, we have found that the curriculum only teaches what victims need to do to prevent sexual assault. The high school curriculum includes objectives to teach refusal strategies for sexual pressure. This is sending the wrong message to our students. Instead of teaching our students to fight off sexual pressure, we should be teaching them to not engage in sexual pressure. Teaching affirmative consent must come at an earlier time than college, and we have a crucial role in making that happen. For these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report on MC 1417.
Thank you. Ms. Maeve Sanford Kelly?
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the delegation. My name is Maeve Sanford Kelly, and I go to North Bethesda Middle School. I'm here to talk about including consent in the sex ed curriculum because it's extremely important. 53% of 7th through 12th graders are sexually assaulted by a peer. It's my understanding that the school board has said that they would support putting in 10th grade, but not in 7th grade. 10th grade is too late. When 12% of high school girls are saying that they have been forced to have sex, 10th grade is too late. In 7th grade, we're taught about abstinence, we're taught about HIV and AIDS prevention, and we're taught about STDs. We should learn about consent. As middle schoolers, we're constantly consuming media. The movies we see have sex scenes in them. The music we listen to have sexual themes, and you can see naked women anywhere. We hear stories, we read stories about the Brock Turner and Bill Cosby, and we read it, we see it, and all of this stuff. But there's not a disclaimer that says sexual assault is wrong. It doesn't say that sexual violence is bad or that rape is inexcusable. We have to be taught that. Before we are taught about pregnancy prevention and STDs, we have to be taught about consent. I saw that Delegate Morales referenced the rape culture. And that's been going on so long that our entire lives, that's been everything. It's been, rape culture has been part of American culture. Rape culture is a setting in which rape is pervasive and normalized due to societal attitudes about gender and sexuality. Right now, when you look at the college campuses, when you look at the workplaces, when you look at the schools, when you look at the recent elections, you see that sexual assault has been normalized. We can change that in Montgomery County. It's not an impossible thing to do. We can do it, but we need you to help us do it. You can help us by including consent in both the 7th and the 10th grade curriculum. I ask you to support this, and I ask you to consider this bill. And I leave you with the words of a young Hillary Rodham from her 1969 commencement address. She said, "For too long, our leaders have viewed politics as the art of the possible. The challenge now is to view politics as the art of making what appears to be impossible possible." Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of this panel? Delegate Kaiser.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, Maeve, you were phenomenal. And also, happy birthday to you, Delegate Kelly.
Which Delegate Kelly?
That's true.
The one who's turning 28 again today.
My question, Delegate Kelly, you're focusing on the 7th and 10th grade and said the school board's more interested in 10th grade. But knowing that we have age-appropriate sex ed at even younger ages and that this is an issue of respect, did you even consider some way of also including or requiring some lessons in earlier grades that also impact those issues?
Thank you for that question. And yes, that would be actually consistent with how we address other components of sex ed to the 3rd through 5th grade window. We might want to consider it in that. I would certainly be open to that. There's no reason not to do that. I think it's a great idea.
Any other questions for this panel? Then I thank you all very much, and Maeve, especially thank you to you for bringing your perspective. I'd like to call up a panel of supporters, please. Tag Larrabee, Amber Banks, Jeanette Felder, Matt Post, Michelle Guathon. Mr. Larrabee, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, and the members of the Montgomery delegation for having me today. I'm here on behalf of the Montgomery County Regional SGA. My name is Tig Larrabee. I'm a junior at Richard Montgomery High School just down the street. So MCR, just as a brief introduction, is basically like any other student government organization, but at a larger scale. Since 1958, we've represented Montgomery County's student body and advocated for its legislative interests. And as that student body grows, we believe that we have a mandate to advocate for its expanding needs. So I think Bill MC 1417 is fully consistent with that mandate. Our student body here at Montgomery County Public Schools values respect. We hold dear the principle that students shouldn't be coerced ever, and that's enumerated in our student handbook, in our state laws, in our federal laws at all levels. Robust consent education is merely the logical extension of that principle to the health classroom. The basis of our health curriculum here in Montgomery County is safety. We try to protect students from physiological ignorance, social pressures, suicide, and drug abuse. And although all of those are important issues, it's an incomplete set of issues if we don't include sexual abuse. Tragically, adolescents run the highest risk of sexual abuse out of any age group, and although we've already heard a lot of extremely moving and tragic statistics on this issue, I'd like to enumerate a few more. Teens ages 16 through 19 are 3.5 times more likely than the general population to suffer sexual abuse. 1 in 5 high school girls, that's 1 in 5, will be sexually coerced or touched without their permission on a date. And by the age of 16, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys has already suffered sexual abuse. And these assaulted teens face significantly higher risks of delinquency, drug abuse, suicide, issues that we try to address in health class, but really, we're not fulfilling our responsibility unless we take concrete and substantive action to address the root cause of these issues. Because sexual assault leads to delinquency. It leads to suicide. It leads to failing classes, and it leads to drug abuse. So, in the opinion of the Montgomery County Regional SGA, students need to be taught that only yes means yes. Students need to be taught about affirmative consent in health class. Thank you, and I urge you to support Montgomery County Bill 1417.
Mr. Post?
Good morning, Chairman Robinson, Chairwoman King, and members of the Montgomery County delegation. I want to begin by thanking all of you for your continued commitment to education here in Montgomery County. I am here today because I have faith in education as a means to bring about positive change, to make a decent and better future. And I truly believe that there is no prejudice too vile or belief too ignorant to be extinguished through education. I am optimistic that this bill represents an opportunity for us to stomp out an abhorrent notion festering within our community and definitively teach our youth about affirmative consent. In fact, this bill and this idea is too important to be restricted to just within Montgomery County. I'm asking you tonight on behalf of students and adults across the state to make MC 1417 a statewide bill and ensure that every student in Maryland understand that assault will never be okay, will never be justified, and will never be tolerated. And we can't delay any longer in the implementation of consent education. As you've all heard, it may already be too late for thousands and millions of people. And I'm speaking here tonight for many of those individuals. I'm speaking here tonight for some of my friends, some of my peers. I'm speaking here tonight for the people who feel afraid to speak out, who feel afraid to talk about their experience. I'm speaking here tonight for those individuals who will always feel afraid next to another man. I'm speaking here tonight for the men and women and boys and girls who will never be the same because one individual never learned that yes means yes and no means no. I'm speaking here tonight because we can never allow that ignorance to be exercised a single time more under our watch. I ask you to report favorably on this bill so we can ensure every student in the state of Maryland understands a basic component of right from wrong. Thank you.
Ms. Felder?
Hi, my name is Jeanette Feldner, and I'm co-president of Montgomery County Now. I'm speaking in support of Bill 1417 to add consent and/or affirmative consent instruction to the current family life and human sexuality curriculum. Affirmative consent means unambiguous and voluntary agreement between participants to engage in sexual activity. Thus, it is the responsibility of each person involved to ensure that they have the affirmative consent of the other to engage in that sexual activity. Consent instruction will empower young women and will reinforce an attitude of respect by young men for young women in their personal relationships. Research shows that affirmative consent education can create this culture of respect, which is basic to human relationships. Sexual assault is a major issue with young people, but it has been underreported and in many cases swept under the rug. We need to stop sexual assault and sexual violence, including on high school and college campuses. Affirmative consent instruction will add another tool to the battle against sexual violence. While many parents and educators may recall learning that no means no when it comes to sexual relationships, students today may more likely need to learn yes means yes, the concept of affirmative consent. No means no is a well-known slogan which places the burden on victims, making it their responsibility to show resistance, with the perception that the victim was the ultimate decision maker in sexual assault circumstances. Another benefit to this instruction is that positive, respectful attitudes may not only prevent rape, but may also help in realigning attitudes about domestic violence in the students who are witnessing or otherwise experiencing domestic violence in their homes. New York, Connecticut, Michigan, New Hampshire, and New Jersey, and at least a half dozen other states have similar affirmative consent legislation or are currently considering it. We believe that the Montgomery County delegation should take the lead in implementing this instruction throughout Maryland. Montgomery County Now appreciates the time the delegation has dedicated dedicating to this hearing, and we ask that you vote in support of this bill. Our written testimony has more information and additional resources. Thank you.
Ms. Banks?
Thank you. My name is Amber Banks, and I represent NARAL Pro-Choice Maryland. We're an advocacy organization supporting reproductive health rights and justice, and among our goals is ensuring that all young people have access to accurate and meaningful information that will lead to positive sexual and reproductive health throughout their lifespans. And for that reason, we are supporting MC 1417, which proposes the addition of affirmative consent to the curriculum for grades 7 and 10. It's important that students are exposed to age-appropriate instruction on affirmative consent as early as possible. The most recent Maryland Youth Risk Behavior Survey found that by 8th grade, more than 1 in 10 Maryland middle school students has had sexual intercourse. And if 1 in 10 has had sexual intercourse, more than that have likely engaged in some sexual behaviors. So it is not too early to begin teaching them about consent. Despite data that shows that middle school students are beginning to engage in sexual behaviors, they're not being given the tools to define their boundaries or to recognize the boundaries of their partners. We've also learned that many high school students in Montgomery County take family life education classes online instead of in a classroom. We feel strongly that it is better to introduce the issue of affirmative consent earlier in the education of our youth when they're still receiving their lessons in a classroom setting where they can discuss these issues with health educators and with their peers. Currently, the state mandates basic components of family life education, and a committee of local stakeholders decides how to best implement these components in their area. We urge support for affirmative consent to be included in the same way. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Montfont? Help me out with that.
Guathon. Good evening. My name is Michelle Guathon. I am the membership director for the Montgomery County Young Democrats. Our organization represents progressives across the county and fights for issues affecting us economically, socially, and politically. One such issue is the issue of rape and sexual assault, something which affects 1 in 4 women between the ages of 18 and 24, and something that 1 in 5 women will experience in their lifetime. It is prevalent across college campuses and is slowly creeping our way into our high schools as sex becomes more a part of high school and social lives. It is cases like what happened in Steubenville, Ohio, where football players dragged an unconscious girl to multiple parties and raped her on video. And like recent cases in San Francisco, where a father claimed his 15-year-old son, accused of raping a classmate, is tall, dark, and handsome, and therefore does not need to rape students, that make it clear that we need better education in our high schools surrounding sex, which is why we are supporting MC 1417, requiring the Montgomery County Board of Education to provide instruction revolving affirmative consent as part of sexual education curriculum. Sex education as taught in our public school system is lacking practical use to help students understand the responsibility which comes with sexual activities, the consequences of which are more than pregnancy and STDs and need to be discussed. It'll change the idea of how we ask students to think about sex. Millennials spend hundreds of hours a week being exposed on television and other video formats to sex, which shows no visual signs of people using protection. There's no discussions of birth control, STDs, or consent, but that is just not the real world. It allows both partners to be more actively participant in the sexual actions and removes the opportunity for cases like Steubenville or De La Salle, where the argument has become she didn't say no, therefore she said yes. MCYD knows that rape culture is prevalent in our society, and while many cases have become prominent in the news cycle, we need to do more than talk about it. I was a student in Montgomery County Public Schools just 5 minutes away from here. I then went to college in the DMV. Too many of my friends were sexually assaulted and didn't even know what happened to them and had no idea how to figure out what to do next. Whether it was because they didn't want to do it, but they couldn't say no, or they were told by their assailant that they said yes, or they didn't say no, or in the case of myself, was in so much shock that they had no idea what to do. We need to flip the script and change the conversation from no means no to only yes means yes. This can not only be a discussion at freshman orientation, where we also remind girls not to leave their drinks or get uncomfortably drunk at parties. This needs to begin where students begin learning about sex and sexuality, because sexual consent is part of that conversation. For these reasons, we request the delegation give the bill a favorable review and support the young men and women in their constituencies who deserve better education. Thank you.
Thank you to the panel. Any questions of this panel? I have a question, either Ms. Feldner or Ms. Banks, if you would help me with this. So affirmative consent would refer to any activity which could be considered sexual, kissing, touching. We're not simply talking about, consent to intercourse. Is that right? When you turn the mic on?
That's the way I see it. Yes, any stage.
So we're talking about a broad range of behaviors which the individual would have to make affirmative consent or know about affirmative consent to allow it to happen to them. Correct?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Then thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I turn it back over to you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I do have a panel of opposition, so this panel may leave, and I'll call up to the table Montgomery County Board of Education member Michael Durso. And I'm sorry, Mr. Durso. No.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening and testify. The Montgomery County Board of Education opposes MC 1417 Family Life and Human Sexuality Curriculum. As expressed in the 2017 legislative platform, the board believes in maintaining local authority to determine educational policy and curriculum for its students. The creation of curriculum is incredibly comprehensive and involves many stakeholders within applicable professions and members of the community. All health curriculum must be aligned and is guided by research done by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the National Health Education Standards, and the Health Education Curriculum Content and Standards outlined by COMAR through MSDE. At the local level, guidelines are provided by a curriculum advisory committee. This committee comprises parents, school nurses, healthcare professionals, health education teachers, students, school-based administrators, and Montgomery County Public Schools Central Office staff. There are continual conversations within MCPS on how to improve our curriculum through the inclusion of current topics. For example, the issue of human trafficking was enhanced at various grade levels as appropriate because of feedback received by our community. Based on the research and guidelines highlighted above, the grade 7 health education curriculum as it relates to sexual activity focuses on waiting to engage in sexual activity, peer pressure, and the potential consequences of sexual activity. As such, affirmative consent at this level would not be applicable or appropriate. At the 10th grade level, a large section of the Family Life and Human Sexuality curriculum is dedicated to sexual aggression and consent. This bill defines affirmative consent as clear, unambiguous, knowing, informed, and voluntary agreement between all participants to engage in each act within the course of sexual activity. In the MCPS curriculum, consent is defined as to agree to do something or give permission. In the context of sex, a person is given full consent, is consenting when he or she freely and actively agree to do something sexual with someone else. However, the person still has the right to change their mind at any point. A person is not consenting if they do not actively agree, have been forced or pressured in some way, or are in a state where they are incapable of full consent, such as when asleep, under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or below the age of consent. The board and MCPS staff recognize the sensitive nature of this legislation and the importance of students fully understanding consent. Therefore, staff will bring the topic of affirmative consent and how it could be incorporated in the 10th grade health curriculum to the Curriculum Advisory Committee for further conversation with the appropriate stakeholders. I also want to thank Delegates Kelly and Morales for bringing this up, and we certainly do not preclude working together as we proceed with this issue, and that would not be exclusive of the issue involving our 7th graders also. However, for these reasons, we oppose this bill and ask for an unfavorable report.
Thank you, Mr. Durso. Questions? Delegate Kelly? Delegate Kaiser?
Thank you. Mr. Durso, thank you. I have a question similar to what I asked of Delegate Kelly before in understanding. So I see how you say that your Curriculum Advisory Committee and all the experts and everything playing into it, and why you don't want to include this in 7th grade because of the focus that you take. But is there a reason why your 3rd to 5th grade or 7th grade curriculum, well, I guess, is there something already in place that talks about respect in these situations leading up to the issues of consent? Is there something already there and which might be a point of compromise that we start to teach these themes a little earlier on, even if it's not consent itself?
I'm not sure I can give you a straight answer on that. I can research it. Our focus, in fact, I talked to one of our health educators just today who's goes back to when we first went through, probably 10 plus years ago, the whole family life curriculum, which, as you may recall, was reasonably contentious. But
for different reasons.
Right. But so to answer your question, I'd be willing to get back to you on that. I think there is. I can't be definitive, but I do want to make the delegation aware that we share these concerns, and we share the concerns of those who had spoken earlier. And when the Curriculum Advisory Committee takes this up, we will certainly encourage some discussion of the 7th grade factor also.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Durso.
Thank you.
Now,
Thank you, Delegate Cullison. Now we're going to move on to the Economic Development Committee, chaired by Ariana Kelly.
Hello. We are hearing MC 2017 Montgomery County Alcoholic Beverages Class A licenses. Presenting that is Delegate Charles Barkley.
Madam Chair, if it's okay with you, can I just bring up the rest of the supporters?
Absolutely. That would be Janan Italiano, Charles Washington, and I believe Ashley Bagwell is joining for questions if necessary.
Correct. Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the delegation, thank you for hearing MC 2017 Montgomery County Alcohol Beverage Class A licenses. MC 2017 is a very straightforward bill. It simply allows an individual or corporation that currently holds a Class A license in the state to obtain a second Class A alcohol beverage license in Montgomery County. The current limit is 1. For the past 6 years, I've been the chairman of the Alcohol Beverage Subcommittee, and as chairman, I've done all I can to protect Maryland's 3-tier system. Part of that system has always been to protect the small retailers. At the same time, we have more and more requests from our constituents and consumers to provide a better variety of alcohol beverages at more reasonable prices. In order to address this demand, we passed bills allowing wine shipping from wineries, but not from retailers. We passed a corkage bill allowing customers to bring their own wine to a restaurant. We passed many bills opening up access to wines and beers from local wineries and breweries. The craft beer market has really taken off. 6 years ago, I had no idea what a growler was, but now we have them across the state for sale for beer and wine. The number one request I get from constituents is to be able to buy beer and wine at chain grocery stores. Allowing that would put many small retailers out of business since many are located right next door to the grocery store. As an alternate proposal, I'm asking you to allow holders of a Class A license to obtain one additional license. Let me just cut right to the chase. The largest holder of a Class A license in Maryland is Total Wine & More. Just like some large restaurant chains, Total Wine & More would like to expand their business in Maryland. It would be nice for them to be able to open a store in Montgomery County where their national corporate headquarters is located. Without this bill, they cannot do that. Some have asked why I'm pressing the bill. They're certainly a big operation. They operate in 21 states and have over 150 stores. But the fact that their national headquarters is located in Montgomery County, where they employ over 500 individuals, local individuals, they have future plans that will double the number of employees in their headquarters. But under current law, they're not allowed to open a store here in Montgomery County. The store in McLean, Virginia, generates about 25% of its business from Montgomery County residents. That is revenue that the state of Maryland is losing every year. The store in Laurel is very similar. They generate about 20% of its business from Montgomery County residents. Last year, both Montgomery County and the state of Maryland worked really hard to keep Total Wine & More headquarters in Montgomery County. And I believe they both provided loans so they would move their headquarters and stay right here. Total Wine & More is a successful company that is headquartered in Montgomery County but does not have a retail location here. We should allow businesses to grow where and when it makes sense for them to grow, including Total Wine & More. We should give Montgomery County residents who are currently driving to McLean or Laurel an opportunity to do their shopping right here, stay home, and spend their money where they live. Let me finish by reminding the delegation the General Assembly has discussed, ultimately passed legislation in recent years that greatly increased the number of licenses allowed for other kinds of establishments and other license holders. In 2012, we passed Senate Bill 627 for large restaurant chains. And that bill greatly increased the number of Class B restaurant and deluxe restaurant licenses that major restaurant chains could hold throughout the state. And I put a summary in my testimony. I'm not going to read it all, but in Montgomery County, the large chains now can have 10 restaurants instead of 6. That's a big increase. The bill was a major expansion for these big chains. Yet no one really objected to allowing this many additional licenses. Senate Bill 627 passed the Senate 46-0, the House 128-5. It is time that we look at the issue of Class A licenses and make a change that allows those licenses who want to grow the opportunity to grow. I want to thank you for listening to me today. I'm not asking you to greatly increase the number of Class A licenses. I'm simply asking you to go from 1 to 2. This bill offers a modest, common sense approach. It will support business owners who want to grow their business here in Maryland in a very modest way. Please give it a favorable report. Madam Chair, can I go to Mr. Washington next?
Good evening, Chairman Robinson. Happy birthday, Chair Kelly. And good evening, members of the Montgomery County delegation. My name is Charles Washington. I'm Director of Government Affairs and Industry Relations for Total Wine & More, here in support of MC 2017. Total Wine & More is a national retailer with 149 stores in 20 states, but our roots are right here in Montgomery County. Our corporate headquarters, as Delegate Barkley said, is only 5 miles away in Bethesda, and it supports 500 of our over 5,000 employees. As a local company, Total Wine & More supports this legislation because it gives us the opportunity we've so sought, the opportunity to open a store right here at home. But this bill isn't just about us. This bill would give any Class A license holder an opportunity to apply for a license in Montgomery County. For some smaller retailers, this might be their best opportunity to grow their business if they so chose to seek that opportunity. But it's important to note that this bill does not guarantee that anyone, including Total Wine, actually obtains an additional license. It merely authorizes the Montgomery County Liquor Board to issue a second license in the county to a Class A licensee should that licensee meet the requirements. And to be absolutely clear, this bill does not change, nor does it circumvent any of the local approval process that is already in place. One more thing this bill does not do. It does not contemplate any changes in the operation of the DLC, and it should not be conflated with bills that do. If this bill were to become law, It would only allow a Class A licensee to apply for a license to sell beer and wine only. I would like to thank Delegate Barkley and the others in the delegation for sponsoring this bill that gives Class A licensees the opportunity to grow their businesses. Total Wine is in support of this legislation and requests a favorable report.
Good evening. I'm Gianna Taliano, President and CEO of the Greater Bethesda Chamber. We represent over 630 businesses employing 45,000 people in the Greater Bethesda region. I'm here tonight to testify in support of MC 2017, Montgomery County Alcohol Beverages Class A licenses. This bill allows licensees to grow by adding one more additional store, and we support allowing businesses the opportunity to grow in this state. MC 2017 is not just about Total Wine & More, which is a long-standing member of our chamber. It's about the other successful local wine and beer operations that want to expand and are held back by an antiquated state regulation. This is the only industry where government is telling businesses who want to grow that they can't. And this bill doesn't even allow for unlimited growth, as some states have unlimited licenses. It's only one additional store that has to be approved by the local Board of Commissioners. I appreciate your consideration of my remarks, and I urge you to also support MC 2017. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Delegate Kramer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Barkley, a couple of questions, if I may. You indicated a couple of times in your comments that this is simply asking to allow a store to go from 1 to 2. Now, let's say hypothetically speaking, I have a business partner. Hypothetically speaking, that could even be my sibling. And if I were to have a license and wanted an additional license, and my partner, if it happens to be my sibling, also is seeking additional license, would they each be able to receive a license under the language of this bill?
Each individual that currently has a license would be able to receive another license under this bill. Yes.
So hypothetically speaking, this isn't simply really going from just one store to 2 stores. It might be going from 1 store to immediately 3 stores, assuming then there's not another bill in next year that would say, let's simply give them 2 stores and so on and so on. And in fact, if I recall correctly, has there been a time, and I appreciate the fact as chair of the Liquor Committee, you probably have better recall than I do, legislation that would allow many new stores to a licensee in the last few years? Do you recall that there's such legislation that has been introduced?
Not to my knowledge.
No?
Not for many additional stores. We had it, as I mentioned, we had the one for restaurants, but not for stores.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Is there anything in this legislation that would limit the square footage size of these additional licensees that would be coming into Montgomery County? And the reason I ask about that is that the beer and wine stores here in Montgomery County are really one of the last vestiges of mom and pop businesses that exist. Because of the Walmart effect, we have lost virtually all of our mom and pop businesses. And because of the existing standards that we have in place, mom and pop businesses have been able to thrive in the beer and wine sector, in that industry. And very often, these mom and pop businesses are owned and operated by new immigrants to our county who have put everything they have into this business. This is their opportunity to live the American dream. And I guess my concern would be that if we bring in the Walmart of the beer and wine industry, what happens to all these small mom and pop beer and wine stores the moment you have a mega Walmart beer and wine open up next door to them. So is there anything in this legislation that limits the square footage, size of this new licensee coming in?
I almost forgot what the original question was, but currently in state law for Class A licenses, there is a 10,000 square foot limit. Now, I can double check that when I get to Annapolis, but I'm pretty sure the limit right now for any Class A would be 10,000 square feet. And that would also apply to these licenses.
And would you speculate as to what the typical size of a mom and pop beer and wine would be in Montgomery County? Would you agree it's probably in the 1,200 square foot to maximum 2,000 square foot range? 10,000 would be a Walmart to those people.
Since you're better in that business because you know the square footage since you rent out facilities, but I'm not really sure. But I know that some of the newer stores are at least 5,000 square feet. So, but I'm not sure about all the mom and pops. I have to go out and do some measuring for you.
Okay, no, thank you. I appreciate that. There was a comment, Mr. Washington, always a pleasure to see you, sir. It's nice to have you here this evening.
Feel the same.
You had made a comment that this is going to be beer and wine only. You specifically offered that in your testimony. Right now in Montgomery County, we have, and we had the bill hearing for it the night before last, legislation that will create, should it pass, agency stores allowing spirits to be sold in existing beer and wine stores. So right now we have two bills running on parallel tracks, one that would allow beer and wine to have liquor, and the other that would allow mega stores entering Montgomery County in the field of beer and wine. Do you believe at some point there may be an intersection of these parallel tracks where this mega beer and wine that you indicated would exclusively sell beer and wine will suddenly be allowed to also be selling spirits?
You had the bill that you referenced before you 2 nights ago. 2 nights ago, Delegate Kramer, I was having a leisurely dinner with friends and family. Total Wine did not take a position on that bill. I'm here to testify today on the bill that would allow one additional licensee here in Montgomery County. That's the bill we support, and we didn't have a position on the spirits agency bill that you're discussing.
All right, thank you for that. And then just one last question, and I wanted to ask Delegate Barkley, you made mention of the fact that Total Wine was looking to relocate their headquarters, but decided to stay in Montgomery County after there were some kind of accommodations made in regard to, I assume, low interest loans or some kind of buy-in by Montgomery County and the state of Maryland. Is that correct?
I didn't use the word low interest, but I
Okay,
did say that the state and the county both offer some type of loan to Total Wine to help them with the relocation of their headquarters.
All right, so would you not agree that perhaps in response to the quote by, and again, Mr. Washington, I hope you don't mind, and I think I've got this correctly, our roots are right here in Montgomery County. Is it possible that those roots are rather shallow in that Total Wine was prepared to leave Montgomery County were concessions not granted by Montgomery County and the state of Maryland?
Mr. Kramer, Delegate Kramer, you're in business, and I think when any business is considering a move, they often negotiate with the current county or state before they make that move. I think there's always been threats over the years by many, many companies. I can think of Marriott right now that, they threatened to move to Virginia also, and they ended up not moving. They got some type of help to stay here. So I don't think that's an atypical practice. I think that often happens, and it doesn't mean the roots are still not here. I think that's a business deal.
And
Thank you.
I would like
All
to
right, thank you for
respond
that.
as well, Delegate Kramer, if you would. And I just want to be clear. Despite the past situation that you discussed What's clear is that today, Total Wine has doubled down on its commitment to Montgomery County. Our owners live in Montgomery County. I live in Montgomery County. The vast majority of our management lives in Montgomery County as well. And we are committed to growing our business here in Montgomery County. From 500 today to many more as our business grows across the country. And so I couldn't let it go with the suggestion that we have a shallow interest in Montgomery County. The reason we want a store here is because we're so committed. And we hope that the members of the delegation would appreciate our support to the county and support this bill.
And in recognition of that, the decision to stay here was made without having these Total Wine stores located in Montgomery County. So clearly, the decision to stay in Montgomery County was not predicated upon having their mega Walmart stores located here in Montgomery County. Perhaps it's because of the talent pool that exists in Montgomery County in the way of our labor, and the fact that this isn't home to the owners and the concessions that came from the state of Maryland and Montgomery County to entice them to stay here. Would that not be an accurate statement?
Where you and I totally agree is that Montgomery County has a talent pool that makes it an attractive place to locate a headquarters. But what we've also seen is we looked at our customers across the country. If I were to paint to you a poster customer of Total Wine, it's a Montgomery County resident.
Thank you.
People who appreciate service, who appreciate selection, and appreciate superior customer service want to shop at Total Wine. And we would like to give customers here who are driving to Virginia and driving to Laurel the opportunity to shop at home the way that we want to have a store at home.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions for this panel? Wonderful. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'll call up a panel of opponents now. Mr. Peter Frank, Gino Wren, Justin McInerney, and Jack Milani. And we'll start with Mr. Frank.
Thank you. Thank you again for letting me add my comments on this bill in particular. This discriminatory bill encroaches on Montgomery County licensees and should be known as the carpetbagger bill. For those of you who don't know what a carpetbagger is, the dictionary definition is an opportunistic or exploitive outsider. Permitting any person or entity a second license essentially grants a chain store license, which violates a prohibition of the state alcohol laws. In fact, it's my belief that this is really an attempt by its sponsors to undermine that very law. It throws over 350 local retail beer and wine licensees under the bus. This delegation should overwhelmingly support local licensees, not external opportunists. You should also be aware, as you deliberate this bill, that the Comptroller's Office recently curtailed unlawful gratuitous services that were demanded by certain local chain stores. Big is not better. This bill should not be amended, but rejected in its entirety, as it appears to be tailored to deliberately permit specific licensees access to the Montgomery County market. The Maryland legislature supports the concept of local entrepreneurship. I hope you do as well. Let's keep it that way. I also had another note here, because you all brought it up in previous testimony. The Trones, owners of the total operation, keep their corporate offices in Montgomery County for the same reasons Marriott decided to remain here. Their principals live in Montgomery County, because they enjoy the quality of life here. Don't spoil it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wren.
Good evening. Local 1994 and its members oppose Bill 2017 as currently written. Let's call MC 2017 what it is, a gift to the Trone brothers and other big liquor stores. We also see this bill and the others as poorly disguised attempt to allow the erosion of the county control laws. This bill would ravage the revenues generated by our mom and pop beer and wine stores and potentially the DLC, which would subsequently undercut Montgomery County's budget. We urge the state delegation to oppose the bill. However, we could and would soften our position on this bill if, and only if, you add the following stipulations. If the Trone brothers or any other large corporate store are allowed to open a location in Montgomery County, the store's maximum square footage could not exceed 2,500 square feet. There are hundreds of small, locally owned mom and pop retailers in this county. Many of the stores are owned by immigrants or first-generation Americans and employ immigrants and people of color. These stores are how they provide for their families and are their pathway to the middle class. Big corporate stores can undercut their prices by their ability to buy in bulk and can find ways to provide discounts that hurt the mom and pop retailers. We've seen it happen recently in the privatization of the Washington state system, and we don't want it to happen here. Finally, any large retailer that is granted a license under this bill must sign a neutrality agreement allowing UFCW Local 1994 the right to organize their workforce throughout the state of Maryland without their corporate interference, a very sound democratic principle, I might add. This past summer, the Democrats at the National Convention reaffirmed their commitment to protecting and strengthening middle class and to supporting the rights of all workers to join labor unions. UFCW Local 1994 asks that you be true to your party and its expressly stated philosophy. We don't need to be handing the Trone brothers Christmas gifts. They don't need the money, as witnessed by the $13 million David Trone just spent on a losing effort to buy a seat in Congress so he could continue to line his pockets. And we don't need a constantly reward business leaders who think it's okay to buy access. That's Mr. Trone's quote, not mine, to get legislation passed that favors their businesses. We need to protect the people who rely on their sustainable jobs to provide for their families. We need to raise up working families, and we need to work towards addressing income inequality. That's what Democrats do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wren. Mr. McInerney.
Good evening, everybody. Justin McInerney. I'm a beer and wine merchant here at Capital Beer and Wine in Bethesda, where we have 500 of the best beers and wines you've never heard of. I grew up here. I've lived in Montgomery County for 50 years. My son goes to Montgomery County Public School. My daughter went to Montgomery County Public Schools. I live and work in Montgomery County. My wife lives and works in Montgomery County. I'm here to testify in opposition to MC 2017. For what it's worth, I'm also a practicing attorney. I believe that MC 2017 is certainly in spirit and perhaps in actuality what's called a special law in violation of Article 3, Section 33 of the Maryland Constitution. That is to say, MC 17 is carved out for a special class of people which is illegal. That's why MC 2017 is variously called the Trone Bill or the Total Bill. More importantly, as the MSLBA will note, MC 2017 goes against 50 years of Maryland law, which has specifically precluded chain stores from holding licenses. As a retailer in Montgomery County, I already have one extraordinarily powerful chain in the form of the Department of Liquor Control, which boasts 25 retail stores, as well as doing hundreds of millions of dollars in annual revenues. Meanwhile, you want me and my colleagues to compete against a company that does over $1 billion of revenue in over 20 states. That's really a lot to ask of a small business in addition to, I don't know, $500 fine for not shoveling my sidewalk on time, as well as an increased minimum wage, but that's another discussion for another day. This is wildly unrealistic. Small businesses are being attacked from all sides here. If you truly support the little guy, if you truly support small family-owned businesses, then you will not support MC 2017.
Thank you. Mr. Milani.
Jack Milani, Legislative Chair for MSLBA. I'm filling in for Steve Wise, who's in Dorchester County. Just a few things to touch on. I can help Delegate Barkley. The 10,000 square foot rule is what the local liquor board can approve. Anything over that has to go to the comptroller. To give you an example, last September, Mr. Trone applied for an extension in Anne Arundel and was granted 20,000 square foot store. His store in Baltimore County is closer to 30,000 square feet. I don't blame him. He's going to go after it. He's a very good retailer. Him and his brothers are good at what they do. And don't kid yourself on this one license. That's what happened in Tennessee and some other states. And they immediately went to work on, some through lawsuits, some through legislation, to expand it. I don't blame them. They're a very good retailer. They can come in here basically with their 2 stores that aren't part of the chain supposedly, but when you go on the website, they pop up. I'm not sure how that works, but they already are the giant. And now you're going to let them come into a county and really go after my guys, the small guys. These folks have small stores. Delegate Barkley talked about the variety in McLean. It's tremendous, great store. But they're not going to have that variety here under the current system. They're going to have the same thing that the DLC stores have. So, you know, it's kind of Pollyanna. I mean, it's not what they're selling is not what you're going to get. You're just going to get a large store that will probably go after the DLC immediately. You know, it's not in their interest to operate that way. I can just kind of let you know that, you know, as a little guy, I'm in Baltimore County. I live in Glenwood. My store in Glenwood Liquors, you know, those are the kind of guys that are small and they're surrounding you. That reach, if it ever breaks the DLC, his reach is going to go well beyond your borders. You're going to be hurting a lot of small businesses. I don't think that's the intent. I think you got to really look at the future and where you think this is going to end up. If you truly believe they're going to be content to come in and open one store under the DLC, then, you know, I got some bridges to sell you something, because it's just not going to happen. It's not in their nature. They're very, very good, astute retailers. They have a national presence. You know, they have government relations directors. They have multiple vice presidents. I'm a bar owner who doesn't even get paid, but I'm out here because these are my guys. That's me. I have 3 kids. I honestly, my son wanted to come into business when he came out of school. I won't let him because of these type of bills. You know, these type of bills are going to do away with probably one of the last vestiges of small independent retailers. So I just want you to think this through, and hey, if you think it's a good idea, just be realistic and realize where it's going to end up. And if you still think it's a good idea, then you got to do what you got to do, but don't for one second think this is going to be one store and they're going to be content with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Milani. We have several questions for this panel. We'll start with Delegate Ludke.
Thank you very much. Mr. McInerney, what class of license do you hold?
Well, it's an A, but
so under this
that's
bill,
off premise, yeah.
But under this bill, you would be able to get a second license.
A second license in Montgomery County? I thought it was for licensees who hold the license in another county.
If an individual holds a Class A license that's issued by any Board of License Commissioners in the state.
Right.
So this doesn't just apply to one license holder, it applies to any Class A license holder in the state. And therefore your constitutional argument is false.
Well, then why is it called the total? I said,
it's called, sir, it's called MC 2017.
I said, if not in reality, in theory. So, so I didn't say I'm going to litigate this and win it on motion for summary judgment. This is called the Trone bill for a reason. It's not called the McInerney bill.
Well, sir, look, I appreciate there are differences of opinion on this bill.
Right.
And I appreciate there are some strong feelings by people whose businesses would be affected. I think there are some reasonable arguments on both sides, but I don't think there's any need to bring up arguments that are empty. And, you know, I think my ultimate question here that I think has been missing from this discussion is you all are asking us to continue to have the government prevent people from being able to have multiple licenses. And this is the only industry, I think, where the state government does that. We don't do it, and correct me if I'm wrong, we don't do it with tobacco retailers. We don't do it with other state license industries. We certainly don't do it with the regular retailer licenses that the clerk of the court issues at the courthouse. So why should we treat alcohol any differently from any other industry in the state?
Well, we don't have the hours here, honestly. You go back to 1870 and talk about the evolution of the prohibition and the nascent women's rights movement, which gave rise to this. You're talking about the three-tier system. First of all, there's a lot more that goes into this than limiting the licenses. Gas stations, for example, they cannot be owned by a petroleum producer. Automobile dealerships cannot be owned by automobile producers. That's what's going on with Tesla right now. So this is a three-tier system, which is super challenging. If you've got a beer wholesaler, you've got a monopoly on a certain territory that's granted by law. Pretty much every single drop of alcohol that's consumed in this country has to go through a wholesaler. So, I mean, this is a several-hour-long discussion.
Sir, I appreciate that, but what you're talking about are efforts to prevent vertical integration, which can lead to problems in the marketplace. And this bill isn't talking about that. It's talking about just for retailers. So my question is why? Sure.
Chains are already illegal.
I think what you have to look at is a couple things. Number one is it is a highly regulated industry, and we could go back to the repeal of prohibition and set up a three-tier system and states having rights. And I mean, in our state, we have individual county boards. That's very unique. It's not done that way anywhere else. So it is a lot of regulations, and we kind of understand when you go into this business, you know it's highly regulated. You know, but what we're saying is forever and a day, the preamble for Article 2B talks about promote temperance. They don't want to get back to the days where there were multiple stores on all the corners. And we could debate that, Delegate, but I think you understand where I'm heading. What we're looking at is the rule is one person, one license for off-premise sales. Delegate Barkley's correct on the restaurants. In my county, it's 12. But what that is that's the sale is incidental. The alcohol sales are nominal. We did that at a time when there was a lot of consolidation. We went to 12, but we did interlocking ownerships where Darden might have 3 or 4 concepts, where before they'd each get 3. Now we give them 12, but of all of them. So, you know, those are different type arguments. But I do think that it's a pretty critical time in our industry as retailers, because if this happens, then basically, eventually, a lot of us won't be here. Other states do it differently, but a lot of states started out that way. So what we're seeing is people have invested, families, local people, you know, that have done it, and there's a genuine fear that you're going to give another license to someone who already has one in Maryland, but the one party has 150 outside the state. You know, we're not sure how they got into the state because we fought them each of their stores. We lost it. He's here. They're here to stay. But, you know, if this was the average Schmo, they might think about it differently. But you're talking about someone that has 145, 150 stores being able to come into Montgomery County and take on these 15, 18, 2,500 square foot stores. I mean, he'll win, probably quickly. But is that where you want to end up?
Yeah, and I think it's an ongoing conversation. But when, you know, Starbucks came in and shut down a lot of local coffee shops, it had some impacts on the community, but we weren't seeing...
I don't think they were as regulated as the alcohol industry. I think, Delegate, I would love to have lunch with you one day and talk about it.
Let's talk about it offline. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Lutke. Let's hear from Delegate Resnick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. McInerney, a question for you. Are you familiar with a practice that has happened often in the past and is currently going on now, where a Class A licensee, either in Montgomery County or in another part of the state, holds multiple licenses through members of their family under their own roof?
Yes.
And does the State Licensed Beverage Association support that practice?
That would be.
I'm not here for the MSLBA.
Or does the local county chapter support that practice?
Well, informally, no, we don't have a position. We certainly, some of my colleagues
Have you ever
do.
made an effort as the State Licensed Beverage Association to stop that practice through law or through enforcement?
Well, Jack can speak to the MSLBA.
We have opposed licenses at the local board when we became aware of it. It does become difficult where, say you had two brothers and each of them get a store.
I'm not even talking about two brothers, two different households. I'm talking about
husband and wife.
Husband, wife, adult children, parents, all living under the same roof, all essentially operating the same business.
I'm not
but
as familiar with, I'm familiar with several that are father, son, father, daughter, but they're not, they're adult children. They're not living in the roof. So I would say to you that we would oppose anything that tries to circumvent the law.
But that can happen and it has happened. Is that not correct?
Oh, I would, absolutely. I'm sure people, I mean.
And is that a violation of the spirit of this law, do you think?
I think it is, absolutely.
Okay, so why would we have a practice that can happen and you can oppose it at the licensing board, but it can still be granted, correct?
If they can pull it off, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why would we allow a practice that violates the spirit of the law and not simply endorse a practice where individuals can just carry two licenses?
Delegate, I would say that there's a lot of people who circumvent the law and do things they're not supposed to do, but I wouldn't pass a law to make it legal because they got away with it. I just don't follow your logic.
My logic is that we're not letting them get away with it. We're essentially endorsing the practice by allowing it to continue. And yet simply having a second license is a problem. And yet, but allowing multiple family members to maintain multiple licenses and essentially operate as the same business seems to be okay.
You didn't legislate against it, did you?
Well, we could, and yet we've never had the State Beverage License Association come to us and ask us to do that. We've never had any other retail group. We've never had anybody come and ask us to legislate against it. You, sir, have never come and asked us to legislate against it.
Delegate, I would say to you that we have at the local level opposed ones that we were aware of.
But alcohol is a state law, is that correct?
But it's done locally. That's what you say. It's not done at the state level. Those hearings take place in the counties. And that's
I understand
what
that,
we
but
have
as
done.
state law, you have never advocated to end that practice.
We have gone and spent money on legal counsel to oppose it. So I don't know what else we could do. I mean, it's already illegal. Do we want to make it illegal again? I mean, help me with this. I'm not following it.
Well, my point is that it's not illegal, but I'm going to move on. Mr. Wren, just a quick clarification on something you had said. You said that you would soften your position with a number of criteria.
Right.
One of those criteria was to sign a neutrality agreement that would allow McGeo to go in and organize those employees. You want us to write McGeo into the law?
I want you to consider the impact it will have on union jobs.
No, that's not my question.
Let me answer your question.
Okay.
Okay. Neutrality agreements are used in virtually every industry where there are represented workers to level the playing field. So big box stores, Walmarts of the world can't come in and destroy the playing field. And then it's a rush to the bottom instead of a rush to the middle or the top. When you allow these big retail, our union is the prominent retail union in the country. We represent 1 million retail workers across America and Canada. And I can tell you, if there aren't measures to protect the union contracts that exist, then the entire community takes a hit, because what replaces the sustainable jobs are low-pay jobs, which many of their employees rely on public assistance. Do you realize the taxpayers of this country handed over $6.2 billion in social service subsidies to the Walmart last year? Not because they can't afford to take care of the workers, because they're operating over the backs of the taxpayers. And that's the point I'm making. You have to be mindful of the consequences of allowing these conglomerates to come in and rearranging the furniture on the Titanic. That's the point.
So, Mr. Wren, I appreciate that. And I
Okay.
frankly don't disagree with a single word you just said. Okay. And I'd be perfectly happy if retailers were to organize, whether it's big box stores or some of the smaller operations here in Montgomery County. My question to clarify was
Correct.
not that. My question to clarify was, do you want us to write Local 1994 into the law? Because that's what it sounded like
Well,
you
just
asked for.
take 1994 out and write simply that
That was my clarification, because that was the statement that you made.
that they have to enter into a neutrality agreement with whichever union decides to go after their workforce.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to clarify
Yeah,
that
I
you
mean,
weren't asking us to
I
write
get your
you in.
point. I get your
All
point.
right, thank you.
All right, before we go to the next question, I just want to make a quick point. This is really interesting. It's an important issue. I want us to remember this isn't a work session. It's a bill hearing, and we'll have plenty of opportunities to continue this discussion moving forward. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We'll hear next from Delegate Corman, followed by Delegate Kramer. Well done. Delegate Kramer.
I'm not that courteous. Thank you, Madam Chair. Gentlemen, you were just asked a question about a family scenario that may have more than one license, and I believe that may be the circumstance with the discussion we've been having tonight with Total Wine. But would you not agree that by now granting additional licenses to those exact same families, we're not making it better, we are exacerbating what already is an acknowledged problem, in that instead of the family members having one license, now they'll each have two, next year they'll have three, the following year they'll each have four. Would you not agree with that statement?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And then finally, just to focus on the uniqueness of this industry, would you not agree that part of the reason it is so regulated, and one of the reasons that in the state of Maryland it was deemed appropriate to have these stores be limited, is that this is the distribution of a legal drug? And this is not selling clothes. This is not selling food items. This is the distribution of a legal drug, which makes it unique and different from other industries. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Barkley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for testifying. I appreciate it. Mr. Wren, thank you, and I appreciate your comments. Let me ask you about the 2,500 square feet. I assume that if we would buy that figure or some other figure, it would have to apply not only to the new license, but apply to all Class A licenses, including the DLC stores?
I took, I'll be candid with you. I kind of did a back of the envelope estimate that that's probably the size of a larger mom and pop store. And writing in maximum square footage when you're introducing big operations into a particular market. We do this quite often when we're up against Walmart. We'll go into local townships, counties, whatever, and convince the legislatures that it's in the best interest of the overall economy to put a maximum on the square footage of the operation, so you have some hope of mitigating the negative impact that these monster colossal operations have on neighborhood mom and pop operations. Do I know if 2,500 is the right number? But I thought that we should have a conversation about trying to safeguard the mom and pops as best we can. They they are our customers. My members serve these folks, and their protections are as important to us as our members' protections. If I sound a little slow, I am, because I'm suffering from having figured out a bad cold or terrible sinus infection. I apologize. But, let me just very quickly, I guess what frustrates me the most about this whole couple years now of arm wrestling, we have yet the interested parties, the stakeholders, the mom and pops, interested parties on the legislature, and others have not really had an adult conversation of how our retail operations and distribution of beer, wine, and spirits in this county should look like going forward. Now, we had a veiled attempt of that with that commission that you folks recommended the executive to have. But that wasn't an exercise in exploring our potential, because they predetermined going into that exercise that they wanted an authority. Well, the authority isn't going to fix anything. That's going to add more bureaucracy, not less bureaucracy. So my point is this, and I'll say this until people take me seriously. Our union remains committed to having an adult conversation with all the stakeholders to figure out how we can reach a compromise. Because the mom and pops should be able to continue to do business without the fear of having to compete against a retail giant that they simply will not be able to compete against. You may think they can, but they won't. My members should not have to come into work every day and worry about losing their jobs and having to go home and tell their kids that we don't have a paycheck anymore. So, as an enlightened community, and sometimes I wonder how enlightened we are, I would suggest that we have this adult conversation and see if we can't figure out a path into the future that meets everybody's needs. But instead, we keep dropping bills, and we keep coming here at the late hour and arm wrestling. And none of us are making progress. None of us are.
I don't know if that really answered my question,
Well,
but
it may not have, but it gave me the opportunity to get some things off my chest, and I appreciate your indulgence. Thank you.
Well, and I agree with all those things you got off your chest, because it would have been nice if, and I'll say it, if the county exec had sat down and had that conversation. But the county exec did not do that, and I wish it would have been done, because I think we could have gotten more out of that task force than what came out. You and I agree on that issue. My question was that if you did this 2,500 square feet, I assume it would have to apply to all Class A stores, including DLC stores. Would that be correct? You couldn't just do it to one.
Let me say this. Whatever the number may be, it should be a level playing field.
Okay.
I don't not disagree with that concept.
That was my question. You answered my question. Thank you very much.
I'd like to remind Delegate Barkley that there currently the stores, the county liquor stores, the dispensaries have no license. They can do what they can. You can't legislate for them, I'm sorry to say. You've already given them authorities that beyond what they should have.
I've not given them that authority, Mr. Frank.
I'm talking
Thank you.
generally.
Thank you. I believe that's the end of our questions for this panel, so thank you all for your testimony. And that concludes the hearing on MC 2017.
And now we're totally going to switch gears to deer hunting. So I'd like to turn it over to the Chair of the Land Use, Transportation, and Public Safety Committee, Delegate Jim Gilchrist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. MC 1017, Archery Hunting Safety Zone, Sarah Morningstar and Jeremy Chris. This is a bill requested by the county through the chair. Good evening.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Mr. Chairman. I'm Sarah Morningstar with Montgomery County. To address the growing deer population in Montgomery County, this legislative request to reduce the safety zone for archery hunting was sent to the County Executive and County Council this past summer by Montgomery County's Agriculture Advisory Committee. Under the bill, the safety zone for archery hunting would be reduced from 100 yards to 50 yards from a house, church, or other occupied building. The County Executive and County Council respectfully urge a favorable report on MC 1017. And sitting next to me is Jeremy Kress, who could describe the need for the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the delegation. I'm Jeremy Kress, the Director of the Office of Agriculture. I'll provide some comments in support of MC 10-17. Most of us know that we truly have a deer population problem in the county. This also includes the urban areas of the county. MC 10-17 will provide additional tools to reduce the deer population. Not all properties in the county can be managed safely. MC 10-17 can help the archery and the bow hunters to manage deer safely from an elevated position, which is the normal practice. I want to thank you, and I encourage you for a favorable report on MC 10-17.
Thank you. Delegate Kaiser has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chris, I have a question. I was definitely in support of the last bill that we had a few years ago, changing it to the 100, and I certainly believe we have a deer problem and that we have to take efforts to reduce it. But have you heard from people in their communities or people who are doing this kind of archery hunting that they have some missed opportunities because it's not the 50-yard? I'm just trying to make sure, understand this solution here.
There are several groups that use archery as a means for sport hunting. And yes, there are a number of properties that could be hunted more effectively if we went to the 50 yards. When I said that the normal practice of archery hunting from an elevated position means that if there is a miss, the arrow does not travel for a long distance. It essentially goes into the ground. In order to be effective with archery hunting, you have to be from an elevated position in order to not have the deer smell you or detect you. Deer are very smart. So the answer is yes, ma'am. There are some groups that we work with, and Bill Hamilton, the county wildlife biologist. This will be an additional tool that can be helpful.
I noticed Harford County builds in for 50 to 100 yards that you need to use a tree stand, and you did not opt for that. Well, why didn't you opt for that?
Well, right now, the safety distance in Montgomery County is 100 yards.
And you want to take it to 50, which Harford County did, but said if it was in 50 to 100, then they required the use of a tree stand.
Oh, I see. Yes, that is the requirement in the language for Harford County. So that's something that if the delegation would want to include for this bill, that would be acceptable.
Delegate Kramer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeremy, I do feel your pain with regard to the deer problem. My concern, and this was the discussion we had just 2 years ago when this bill was introduced, and the compromise just 2 years ago or 3 years ago, was the 100 yards. That's where we were able to reach a compromise. Virtually every study with regard to bow hunting indicates there is a 50% wound rate. That means for every deer that is killed with an arrow, another one goes off into the woods, wounded, but continues to live and suffer. That's an issue for me, and that's my concern with bow hunting. There's no proficiency standard required. Basically, it's anyone who has taken the very basic, hunting class that pretty much says don't point your rifle at somebody and, keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. But I could take the basic education, hunting class, however many hours it is, and I could be the one sitting out there with a bow, within 50 yards of someone's house. And I guess my question is there any consideration to proficiency standards before we start cutting bow hunters loose within this distance of the house, and to also hopefully increase the mortality rate and not the wound rate, which is where I have a concern. And there are alternative methods. They do cost money. To date, our county council has not wanted to put money into providing non-lethal deer reduction methods into place in the county. There are certainly significant ways to do that. But this is the one that doesn't cost any money, so instead, we are willing to send half of these animals off in the woods to either continue to suffer or suffer a very slow death over a period of days and weeks. Any thoughts to that, Jeremy, as to, maybe proficiency requirements or any?
So Delegate Kramer, the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, they are responsible for enforcing the hunting regulations. The county doesn't have the authority to have additional requirements on proficiency. I know that Park and Planning, with their sharp shooting that happens on parkland, they use park police that are meeting a totally different standard. But I don't know how we would be able to develop a level of proficiency at a local level. That would be something we'd have to talk with DNR about. I do understand what you're saying about the rate of wounding a deer versus outright killing the deer. We have to recognize that, as I said earlier, we have a huge deer population in our county.
I agree, and it's a problem, no question.
And so, we all need to ask ourselves, in absence of the tools that we give hunters, I'm not sure what other means we're going to have to reduce the deer population, and we're going to have to live in close proximity with more deer than what the habitat can support. So I hope that attempts to answer your question.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Delegate Lutke.
We're reprising our debate from a couple of years ago. Just one quick question, because reference was made to non-lethal methods of deer control, and I know a number of communities have tried those out over the years, particularly the administration of gonadotropin, to try to cut down on the deer birth rate. But to your knowledge, has any jurisdiction been able to effectively use that to control deer populations in an open environment?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you to this panel. Peggy Dennis, Jonathan Agian, Ira Unger, and Don Rondeau. All signed up in support of the bill.
Good evening. Peggy Dennis, resident of Potomac and representative of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. The Civic Federation has been working on this issue since 2013. We appreciate Eric Ludke's efforts before in shrinking the safety zone. I need to point out the safety zone is a kind of a misnomer. First, because bow and arrow hunting, when it's properly carried out by trained, licensed archers, is one of the safest sports in the country, and a sport which, in our case, would have significant public benefit. DNR has given a little more scope to the term of safety perimeter and archery hunting, in that hunting contains 3 separate acts. The first act is the actual shooting of the arrow. And I've got to stand up here because, as Mr. Chris pointed out, properly licensed archery hunters are not shooting arrows across, like Robin Hood style. They are working from an elevated stand in a residential neighborhood. It could be a tree stand, but it could also be a second-story window or a balcony. All they need to do is get that downward diagonal shot where the arrow does not go onto anybody else's property. The second act of a hunter is, if the deer is wounded, tracking the wounded deer, and third, dispatching the deer and removing it so it doesn't end up dying on anybody else's property. So those are the three acts, and only the first act, the shooting, has any significance where safety is concerned. And you're never going to protect people from poachers and unlicensed hunters who do not know what they're doing, who may shoot an arrow at a deer improperly or at a pet. That has not been a problem anywhere else. I believe there are 5 jurisdictions in the state which have shrunk the safety perimeter to 50 yards, and there have been no negative ramifications that I'm aware of so far. I would also point out that Fairfax County has no safety perimeter. Any property owner can hunt on their own property, even in the back of a townhouse, or allow another licensed hunter to do the same. Again, no problems. So we would say that shrinking the safety perimeter is very important and a badly needed tool to enable private citizens to allow safe hunting to take place on their properties. Thank you.
Good evening. I just want to address 2 items quickly. First, the 50% wound rate.
Could you say your name, please?
Sure. Jonathan Aguion. I'm from the Kemp Mill Civic Association. I'm the chairman of our deer committee. Firstly, the 50% wound rate, I've never heard statistics like that. I'd be very interested to see any studies that suggest that. The number I've heard is between 5 and 10%, and much less with experienced hunters. Non-lethal methods are very expensive, and people can't eat the deer if they're not killed. So just some background on our problem. Our county has a minimal coyote population, especially in the lower county. We don't have resident black bears either to keep the deer population in check. Ongoing research conducted by Penn State shows that less than half of fawns in the study survived their first 10 weeks. Bears and coyotes were the main cause. Here, fawn survival is much higher since we don't have bobcats, bears, and coyotes in numbers like we used to. Other grazers like bison and elk, which once roamed Maryland, are gone. This leaves a unique ecological niche to one species alone, the white-tailed deer. Backyard gardens and bird feeders supplement available food for the deer, and in the springtime the population can jump when does start birthing fawns. The effects of this overpopulation include increased soil erosion, crop loss, Lyme disease, and auto accidents. Farmers in the county lose an estimated 16% of yield due to deer, millions in lost revenue. Over the last 5 years, the county has averaged 2,000 auto accidents caused by deer. Ironically, bow hunters in the county only harvested 2,400 deer last year. And nationally, 200 people die each year in car accidents caused by deer in the roads. Lyme disease is a debilitating illness that has a severe emotional, physical, and economic impact on individuals and their families if not treated early. The county confirmed 341 new cases in 2012 and suspected many hundreds more cases. We need to facilitate efforts to keep the local deer population at an environmentally sustainable level. This past spring, I did a painstaking analysis of houses within Kemp Mill. Properties typically have over 15 other houses within the archery safety zone. Since unanimous consent is required, this had the effect of outlawing bow hunting in our area, and we were not able to secure any area. In all of Kemp Mill, only 13 of over 1,500 properties could be hunted with 4 or fewer consents. Analyzing the county harvest numbers over the last 7 years, you'll see that decreasing the safety zone from 150 to 100 yards led to an increased bow hunting harvest of 4.3%, decreasing it further to 50 yards to a 12.9% increase. 50 yards is a sensible safety restriction that matches the distance an arrow or bolt will travel horizontally. A 50-yard safety zone corresponds to what many other states and 5 Maryland counties have already enacted into law. Private citizens can play a meaningful role in deer management efforts while reducing the agricultural losses and promoting public health. Passing MC 1017 would be a great step forward for sound environmental and economic policy in the county. Thank you.
Mr. Unger?
Hi, I'm speaking tonight as a private citizen supporting MC 1017 to reduce the safety zone from 100 to 50 yards. The healthy number of deer in the area is supposed to be 20 to 30 per square mile. We now have about 10 times that in Kent Mill, 200 to 300 per square mile. The problems that this causes are Lyme disease, car crashes. We had a board member of our civic association had a deer crash through the window recently while driving at night. Home gardening is lost as a favorite pastime because you can't keep your plants alive. Drinking water pollution from runoff of the deer poop, because nobody picks up deer poop like dog poop. The ecosystems of the neighboring forests are degraded because the deer eat everything, and the deer are starving because there's not enough food. And there's, as John mentioned, an agricultural loss of revenue. The reason, of course, is because there are no natural predators. So what to do? So one thing that we can do, which is really not my favorite thing to do, is to organize the community so we could shoot the deer in our own backyards. I think that's a stupid thing to do because we're not deer hunters in Kent Mill, but we have to do it because the county and the state aren't doing anything or are doing not enough to limit the population. And now, to have to do it, to get consents from everybody who lives within 100 yards makes it really difficult because, as John said, there's 15 people, and there's going to be one out of those 15 probably that's going to have some problem with it, or we won't be able to reach them, or we won't have the manpower to reach those people. So I think the least that we can do is to make the burden on the private citizens a little less. Although I really think this is a government duty, not a private citizen duty, and that the county and the state should look into having the government do it and increase the budget so they can.
Thank you. Delegate Kramer?
No, that's all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, panel. The next bill. 2117 Montgomery County Deer Hunting Sundays. Delegate Fraser Hidalgo. Whoever you'd like to bring up with you, David. Delegate. Presuming they're signed up. Okay, Delegate David Hidalgo. Fraser Hidalgo.
Yes, please do not. Got a little of everything in me. Anyhow, Mr. Chairman and members of the delegation, thank you very much for your consideration on this bill, MC 2117. So this bill came about because all of us are really, really sick and tired of talking about deer bills, right? We're really tired of it. And I say that because myself, Delegate Gilchrist, Delegate Robinson, and Delegate Carr all happen to serve on the Environmental Matters and Transportation Committee. And in Environment and Transportation, we hear the deer bills from the entire state. And we hear them every single year, and I don't know, over a dozen come to our committee every single year. And I just thought, you know what, let's just try to see if we can hammer out some kind of compromise because it's a very, very complicated issue. As many of you probably may or may not be aware, there were generally over 32,000 motor vehicle collisions with deer every year in the state of Maryland. And in Montgomery County alone, there is a little over $4 million worth of crop damage that gets done to Montgomery County farmers every year. That does not include the number of individuals that are injured or hurt because of motor vehicle accidents, nor does it include the diseases that the deer carry, and I could go on, but all of you have heard this at one point or another when it comes to bow hunting, when it comes to deer hunting, when it comes to shotgun hunting, when it comes to extending the deer season, or any number of other ways that we deal with the deer. basically, I put together a bit of a work group with a lot of help, and we pulled some of the ag and farmers in Montgomery County, particularly up in the ag reserve and district, mostly in districts 15 and 39, and we pulled the equine folks together, and we all agreed that we have a problem and what's the best way to move forward with it. At the same time that we're working on this, the county council has decided they have a whole slew of bills that they're putting forward, some of which you've already heard and will probably hear in Annapolis, to deal with the deer population. Again, I don't want to review too much of what's been said, but we don't have mountain lions, we don't have cougars, we don't have wolves, we don't have that anymore. So the population is just completely out of control. So I want to thank everybody here at the table, because everybody came and said, okay, we have a problem, and how do we share the issue? Delegate Kramer or Delegate Resnick, did you have a particular question? No, okay. Oh, you're in awe.
We were wondering if maybe a bill to reintroduce coyotes and black bears might sell.
So that's another bill for next year. So with that said, and with the county council, one of the big initiatives that they're pushing is Sunday hunting, all-day Sunday hunting for the hunting season, which I believe is 14 days. And the work group kind of came together, and there's differing opinions on how to get there. And we've kind of come to a loose-fitting agreement. We still have some work to do, so I don't want to get too much into it, because we'll do some of that work in Annapolis. But the idea is basically to allow hunters to go out on Sunday mornings during the hunting season for a few hours, basically for 30 minutes before sunrise, up until 10 to 10:30 in the morning, if that's one of the issues that we're working out during the hunting season. And that will allow the horse riders, the fox hunters, that will allow the trail riders, it will allow the mountain bikers, it will allow the hikers, it will allow everybody else that wants to go out and on private lands and public lands to be able to use our agricultural reserve and the rest of the county, for that matter, without worrying about a stray bullet or a stray arrow coming over and hitting a person or a horse or any other domesticated animal. Now, this is incredibly challenging, and the main reason because it's so incredibly challenging is because we're not talking about public land, we're talking strictly about private land. So the farming community has a position of which they believe that they should be able to hunt on private land. It's their land every day of the week, and I can't argue with that particular rights issue. I think it is a very good issue. That where it gets a little bit sticky is if their private land abuts public land or abuts other private land, and that other private land or that public land has pedestrians on it or has horse riders on it. Well, that shotgun slug or that musket ball or that arrow doesn't just stop at the property line. It can continue. So the compromise that we've come to has been long. It's taking us about 5 months, 3 meetings of almost 2 hours per meeting. And we are very, very, very close to a final compromise. And I will leave it with one last piece of this, and that is that there are really 2 sticking points of which we're still working on. One is whether that time ends at 10 o'clock in the morning or 10:30 in the morning, which we're working on. And that's not really the larger one. The really larger issue is that there are currently 3 Sunday hunting days in those 14-day periods. So there are 3 days out of those 14 Sunday hunting days in that season in which it is Sunday hunting. So we had started to negotiate that down to just 1 hunting day, with the understanding that the hunters would get an additional 11 days of morning hunting. And that's come back, and there's a little bit of pushback, so we're kind of negotiating those other 3 days. And I will kind of leave it at that, other than to say, please bear with us. This is a work in progress, and we do have the county council's all-day Sunday hunting bill, which, as a courtesy to me, they've been holding back a little bit on, but there is a push from the county council for all Sunday hunting. And I will just kind of let the panel go. I don't know, James.
Delegate, there are 4 signed up in support. I see 6 people up there.
Right.
Peggy Dennis, Ann Davies, Jane Siegler, and Don Rondeau.
Yes, and Bob Sissel is kind of between support and oppose because with the amendments that we discussed,
he is
will be
signed up.
supporting it.
He is signed
Without
up.
the amendments, then it won't. But if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, if we could just go ahead and go through and let everybody have their word.
Thank you. If you didn't
Thank you.
sign up, please be extremely short. But whoever signed up, please go ahead.
Jane, you want to start?
Okay.
You want to go opposed first and then?
No. So let's start with support.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jane Sigler. I'm the president of the Maryland Horse Council. The Maryland Horse Council is a membership-based umbrella trade association of the entire horse industry in Maryland. And as such, we directly or indirectly represent over 30,000 Marylanders involved with horses. Many of our members are hunters of deer, other game mammals, and game birds. Many Horse Council members are also farmers and are painfully aware of the enormous crop damage that deer do, as well as the problems of vehicle collisions and Lyme disease. Although we are a statewide organization, the highest percentage of our members are Montgomery County residents. The horse industry in Maryland in general and in Montgomery County in particular is a large, engaged, thriving constituency and a strong economic engine. The last page of my written testimony contains a graphic with specific information about the economic impact of the horse industry in Montgomery County, which has over $500 million in related assets, over $23 million in annual capital-related expenditures, 1,500 equine-related properties on over 15,000 acres, and supports over 3,000 jobs directly, not counting indirect jobs in related and support fields such as veterinarians, hay growers, etc. In the county, there are 163 hay-producing farms on over 8,000 acres, which produce over 21 tons of hay yearly, primarily for the local equine community. In 2014, the Horse Council conducted a statewide survey on Sunday hunting. About 25% of the respondents were Montgomery County residents. That was the second highest rate of response in the state. 68% of survey respondents ride on trails on public or private land 1 or more days a week. And 56% of respondents said they ride on trails that cross both public and private land. And perhaps most significantly, 85% of respondents said they changed either the location or the schedule of their rides in order to avoid encountering hunters. 85%. Also in that survey, 87% of the respondents said that they either strongly oppose or moderately oppose Sunday hunting. Nevertheless, in the interest of putting this issue to bed, as Delegate David Fraser Hidalgo has alluded to, the leadership of the Horse Council has been working hard over the last several years to engage with the various stakeholders and develop a compromise. We supported the bill that David Fraser Hidalgo initially entered, and we would like to continue further in our discussions.
Thank you. Who's next? Please state your name.
Good evening. My name is Ann Davies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I live on a farm outside Boyd's. I've been there since 1980. I have horses. I ride my horse. I heard a shotgun go off in the woods today as I got on my horse. I decided I'd stay on the road in the open fields and come home again. I'm aware of deer damage to crops. I see it in my neighbors' fields every summer and every fall. I'm aware of deer collisions. I've had a couple of my own. But personally, I have never believed that recreational hunting is the way to manage a deer population. There are better ways, I know, I believe strongly. Now, having said that, my neighbors, my farmer friends believe that this will help. And as a compromise in support of my neighbors and our farmers, I support this compromise of Sunday hunting up until 10:30 in the morning. I will object strongly to Sunday hunting all day for more than the 3 days that we already have. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right. Peggy Dennis.
Thank you. Peggy Dennis, resident of Potomac and representing the Montgomery County Civic Federation. We are very much in support of Bill 2117. As I said, every little bit helps. I do want to address Delegate Kramer's request for experiences. My cul-de-sac in Potomac had for 3 years a bow and arrow hunter come out and work for us with our permission. The first year he came 10 times and took out 11 deer. Not a single deer walked off and was not retrieved. They were all retrieved very quickly just from the spot where he was doing the shooting. I asked the neighbors who were immediately surrounding that area if they had ever been aware of his presence. They said no, even when he came, they were not aware of him. That's because to be successful, an archery hunter has to be very quiet and very discreet. If there are any dogs, horses, or people around traversing the area, the deer are going to scatter and run. They're not even going to be there. That's why the bow and arrow hunters take such pains to use timed bait dispensers to get the entire herd in one place at a time when the hunter can get there. Usually the hunter only has an opportunity to take out one deer per trip. That's why I think it's important to allow Sunday hunting all day, particularly in residential neighborhoods, because most of our volunteer deer hunters are archery hunters. And I want to make it clear, the Civic Federation only supports archery hunters for this bill. We don't think firearms have any place hunting in residential neighborhoods. Archery hunting, yes. Guns, no. You may have some people testifying that archery hunting is inhumane, that it's cruel. I would posit that when you have as serious an overpopulation problem as we have in this county, it's far crueler to have thousands of deer starve during the winter and early spring season when there is virtually nothing out there for them to browse on and eat. I would also say, and this is again from my experience, it's far more cruel to have herds of deer crossing our roads, particularly at night. I have hit a deer. I did not kill it on impact, and I would suggest there are very few people in this county that would do what I did, which is go home, get my husband, knife, flashlights. We went back. We tracked the deer to where it had dropped. It was dying a very slow, agonizing death. We put it out of its misery, took it home, and ate it. Most deer that are hit by vehicles do not have that kind of fate.
Thank you. Bob Sissel, in opposition.
My name is Bob Sissel. I live in Poolsville, Maryland, and I know most of you folks. I've met you over the years. Native Montgomery County, born and raised here. I represent Montgomery agricultural producers, which is 17 farmers in the Montgomery County area that represent about 23 to 25,000 acres of agriculture. That includes the Allnuts and the Lewis Orchards, the tabletop farmers, grain farmers, hay farmers, all the way across the board. I opened this can of worms up in April with the county council, where I approached the council and asked them for 4 things. One was to reduce the safety zone for bow hunting in urban environments from 100 yards to 50 yards. It should be across the board because obviously in non-urban environments it wouldn't matter. But certainly in the urban environments, these folks are talking about, it's important. The other was to extend the deer hunting season by another month, so you'd have February actually to continue to harvest deer. Add an additional week to the shotgun season. So I went for broke and asked for a lot of stuff. But the most important thing I asked for is the Sunday hunting, all-day Sunday hunting on privately owned land, not public land. We feel as an agricultural community representing what we do for a living, our losses are substantial. We can't afford to keep having it going the way it's going. Something's got to be done. Giving us that additional Sunday hunting, we have 3 Sundays now. We would like to have 11 more. Frederick County has Sunday hunting all day. Carroll County has Sunday hunting all day for the entire hunting season. To give you an example, Frederick County, just on this past weekend, the opening of shotgun season, on their Sunday hunting represented for Carroll County, the deer that were killed on Sunday represented 27% of the harvest in those 2 days. A quarter of it was done on a Sunday. Frederick County was 25%. Montgomery County was 21%. Sunday hunting works. The reasons why we asked for this are safety. It's a major issue. Last year, there were 3,934 car accidents in Montgomery County. 3,900. The closest county was Howard County, had 1,600. The next was PG at 1,000, and all the other counties were under 1,000. So if you don't think we have a deer problem, well, I think you all agree we have a deer problem. That kind of car accidents is astronomical. Health issues, deer ticks, and Lyme disease, a major issue. You heard that earlier. The economic losses for the ag community are substantial. A survey was done in 2014 of 39 farmers that represented $48 million in sales and had a $4.3 million loss. That's almost 10%. We're working on margins of profit that are very small in the ag community. So in summary, corn in 1976 was $3.40 a bushel. It's $3.40 a bushel today. We are having losses we can no longer afford. That said, I do want to say, if I can have another 15 seconds, that we have worked hard with Delegate Hidalgo. We are close to having an agreement that we think we can live with. I think in the next day or two, we probably can reach that. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Doug Tregoning.
Good evening. My name's Doug Tregoning. I'm here tonight representing Montgomery County Farm Bureau and its 3,000 members here in Montgomery County. We appreciate this opportunity to testify. I'll first say that our members strongly support Sunday hunting, but Farm Bureau cannot support MC 2117 as currently presented. Consistent with Maryland Farm Bureau policy, County Farm Bureau prefers all-day Sunday hunting. Now, we will acknowledge that many stakeholders will not be in agreement with all-day Sunday hunting, but what we're willing to talk about is a compromise, that being a local bill to allow Sunday hunting on private property for all eligible Sunday hunting days up to 10:30 a.m. and after 3 p.m., retaining all full Sunday hunting days currently in existence. In addition, we'd like to see the bill sunset in 5 years to provide an opportunity to review the practical application and the impacts of the bill. In addition, Farm Bureau would make the following safety education recommendations. Have county furnish signage for private landowners to voluntarily post at reasonable entrances to trails accessing public land from private land that Sunday hunting is occurring and state the hours it's occurring. Also offer education on visible riding apparel and have riders wear visible riding apparel during hunting season. The afternoon hunt, we feel, is very important in an effort to harvest the most deer possible. It's critical that existing Sunday hunting privileges on private land not be taken away. We recognize that safety is an important aspect to all Montgomery County citizens, and we feel that safety education and the requirement of visible riding apparel is an additional step toward equine rider safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Linthicum.
Good evening. I am Tom Linthicum. My family owns approximately 1,300 acres in this county. We operate Seneca Air Farms, which has been in existence for over 200 years. We are a grain, hay, and livestock operation. We have seen the damage deer to agricultural crops. 2 of our farms border Black Hills Regional Park. We suffer losses in excess of 30%. We can now only grow hay on one of the farms because the damage is so extreme it is unpractical to row crop it anymore. We are excited at the possibility that some form of Sunday hunting may soon be possible. However, as this bill is currently written, it will do little to assist us personally in the harvest of deer. On our properties, the largest percentage of our harvest, over 90%, happens in the afternoon and evening hunts. We all recognize that we have a deer population problem that needs to be dealt with. From ag producers who see devastating crop losses which lower their profitability, to the citizens of our county who have been involved in deer collisions on our roadways, damage to their landscaping, and Lyme disease that affects our health. This problem affects us all on both an economic as well as a health issue basis. I ask that you reconsider this bill as presented to include all-day Sunday hunting. This is the precedent already set here in the state of Maryland, with over half of the counties already participating in all-day Sunday hunts. I recognize this approach does not please all residents of our county. However, we must act now to help solve our problem. We need to share in the suffering, whether it's financially, cosmetic, or recreationally, until we control our problem, a problem that is expanding exponentially and is only going to get worse. I cannot support the bill as presented, but encourage you to amend the bill to include all-day Sunday hunting or at least an evening hunt time after 3 o'clock p.m. This will give us another tool in our toolbox to help solve the problem. Thank you, delegation.
Thank you. Joseph Michael. Joseph Michael Joshua Chadwick. Okay, make some room for the two coming down.
I'm Joseph Michael.
Take this seat.
Thank you, Ms. Davies. I'm Joseph Michael. I am
Hitting the button.
which button? Thank you.
There you go.
That one? You good? I'm a deer hunter. I'm a farmer. I'm a lawyer. I'm on the Wildlife Advisory Commission. I do not speak for the Wildlife Advisory Commission. This issue is frequently visited in lots of different counties. I am from Washington County, which has unrestricted Sunday hunting on all species. And I want to talk to you about some facts. There's nothing wrong with the compromise bill. It's a good idea, and I have no qualms about the compromise because what I'm in favor of is not Sunday hunting or not Sunday hunting. I'm in favor of balance of uses. But I suggest to you that what you have now is the most effective days. And at Wildlife Advisory Commission, we look at the statistics. I encourage you. I know somebody has one. Make this every year. Take a look at it. The counties that have Sunday hunting, all-day Sunday hunting, unrestricted Sunday hunting, don't kill any more deer than they did before they had it. And it's just a fact. They kill more deer on Sundays, but there's no more deer killed. That just is true, because what happens is, the interest of most hunters is limited to just killing a few deer, and they can get it done in the weekend that they have or the few weekends they have with firearms. So that is a fact. Consider that fact. Please look at the numbers. And the other thing that I'm concerned about is we have a terrible patchwork. I'm here, statewide. We have to regulate this county, that county, work together to get a compromise for all the counties so that law enforcement can have an idea of what they're doing and have the hunter has an idea of where they can and can't hunt throughout the state. The last thing I'll say is I come to Montgomery County to ride because they have unrestricted Sunday hunting at home, and I specifically come here to enjoy, fox hunting on Sundays. I left my club there because of that. So that's a fact as well.
Thank you for visiting Montgomery County.
I enjoy it. Keep coming.
I'm Joshua Chadwick.
Can you hear me, or do I need to hit this button?
You're on.
Sorry, I signed up at the last minute, and so I'd just like to speak briefly as a recreational hunter. I'm a resident of Potomac, and I have opportunities to hunt deer in a couple spots, one out in the Agricultural Reserve and one in Queen Anne's County. I pay for the opportunity to do both, and like a lot of residents of the county, I have a limited amount of time. I have kids who participate in sports in the county, and I'm also a lawyer, so I'm a busy person. And Sundays are one of the only 2 days I might, like a lot of people that share this hobby, have to hunt. And I'm a bow hunter, and like you've heard a lot of testimony with the bow hunting, when I'm in the woods, I'm very quiet, and I don't see a soul, and a soul doesn't see me. And I'm certainly not affecting, in either case, horseback riders or anyone else who wants to use the outdoor areas. Both the farms where I hunt are a mile square. And as you've heard, an arrow from a tree stand doesn't travel very far. So with respect to private lands in particular, and with respect to archery hunting, I really think the Sunday hunting ban, I'm opposed to the Sunday hunting ban, period, but I think with respect to private lands and archery hunting, there's really no rational basis, really no reason why the legislature should not be allowing that to happen. And I would challenge anyone to really come up with a a sound basis as to why that's not allowed. And to the extent you're going to hold on to a vestigial blue law like this, I mean, my family is a member of All Saints Episcopal Church on Chevy Chase Circle. I like to go to church with my family on Sunday mornings, and to the extent I have free time on Sunday afternoons, I would like to be able to go to the private land that pay to have access to, and to hunt deer quietly in nature. And I really don't think that any of the private landowners in the county should be prohibited from doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no questions, thank you for the entire panel. I'll call up the next bill, but there'll be an announcement. The next bill is 2217, maximum speed limit in business and residential districts, Delegate Corman. And Delegate Robinson has an announcement in between.
Yeah, well, everybody's coming up. I just wanted to congratulate Delegate Will Smith, who will be the next state senator from District 20, replacing Jamie Raskin. And just wanted to let everybody know, because that happened a few minutes ago. Also want to congratulate Delegate David Moon for a hard-fought campaign, and glad they're both going to be back. And if they're listening right now, they should get over here, because we still have 7 bills left. Maybe it's 6, so they need to get in their seats. Thank you.
Delegate Corman, whoever you'd like to bring up with you, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Delegate Moon's bill, actually, so he really should get over here. I don't know what he's dallying about at the Silver Spring Civic Center for. I'm sorry, Senator? I can do it. Thank you. MC 2217 was requested by Councilman Hans Remer, and I think his Chief of Staff should be coming up to the table to talk a bit as well. I just want to be really specific about what this bill does, because if you follow Councilman Remer's feed on social media or read Bethesda Beat, you may be a little bit confused about these bills. MC 2217, once it adopts the sponsors' amendments, which Delegate Moon is having drafted, would take the parts of residential roads, the roads that go through your neighborhood where your kids play, or Chairman Robinson jogs at night, or Delegate Kramer hunts with his bow and arrow in the evenings, and would make those residential roads that are unmarked, that do not have speed limit signs, have a default speed limit of 25 miles per hour. Right now, the unmarked speed limit for an area where there are no speed limit signs is 30 miles per hour, which I actually think most people would find that to be a surprise, that that's actually much higher than they imagine for local neighborhood roads where people are walking, where people are playing. So that's what this bill would do once the sponsors' amendments are adopted. We're talking about a pretty narrow section of the road network in an area that most people, if they're acting responsibly, are already driving much slower than 30 miles per hour. We know statistically that the faster the car is going, if it hits a pedestrian, the worse the injury, or worse than an injury, is going to be to that pedestrian. So it's important that we use all the tools that are in the toolbox to try to reduce speeds on roads like this in neighborhoods where people are walking, running, and playing. This is not about 270, the ICC. It's not about Connecticut Avenue, Wisconsin. It's not about the Mid-County Highway. It's about residential neighborhood roads. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Silverman.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Ken Silverman. I'm Chief of Staff for Council Vice President Hans Remer. Hans really regrets that he was not able to be here tonight, but he asked me to be here in case there's any questions. And he does have a statement that's in your material. I'll save you the time and just summarize. It does apply to 22 and 2317, the next bill as well. Basically, the council has adopted a Vision Zero resolution for Montgomery County. This establishes the goal of getting to 0 traffic deaths. The county executive has engaged in the process of establishing a task force, and they're working through to prepare a report and recommendations. In the meantime, Hans has continued to look for ways to improve safety of the roads. Our office got a request to work on some neighborhood safety improvements, and that's when we became aware of the restrictions in the state law, that the default speed limit on some of really, as Delegate Corman mentioned, the smallest neighborhood roads and cul-de-sacs was 30 miles an hour, and many of these would be posted at 25, and that we were not able to, the county is restricted from lowering the speed limit below 25 miles an hour. We worked with the county executive and his staff to come up with a compromise that we think everyone can live with. Councilmember Reamer really wanted me to thank Delegate Moon for introducing the bills, Delegate Corman for his co-sponsorship, and also Delegate Lutke, who co-sponsored 2417, which was withdrawn as part of this compromise with the executive staff. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Of course, yes.
So would it be, can I just group together 2217 and 2317? I think most people here are testifying on both. I think it'll avoid some confusion. So let me just, if that's all right.
Yeah,
Delegate.
right, and you're right. A lot of the signups are the same.
So just to avoid confusion, I explained specifically what 2217 does about unmarked roads. 2317, again to be specific, would allow after a traffic study, Montgomery County to lower speed limits on county residential roads down to, once the compromise is put in, 20 miles per hour. Right now, they're limited in lowering the speed in county roads due to state law to 25 miles per hour. This would not apply automatically to every county residential road. A traffic study would be required, a process with Montgomery County DOT. We all know from constituent service that those processes do not guarantee any outcome, but that's what 2317 will do. I think most people are going to speak about both together. They're both a part of Vision Zero, but I think it's important that all of us understand that these bills do two specific and discrete things, both of which are important. And with that, I'll turn it over to the other witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Delegate. Is Ronit Aviva here? Okay, you are signed up for both bills, so you'll talk about both bills.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Renita Viva-Dancis. I'm representing the Action Committee for Transit tonight. Quick question. Who wants me to hit them in the head with this ball or would prefer to be hit in the head by Steven Strasberg doing a maybe 90-mile-per-hour fastball? Any takers? No? Okay. Obviously, the reason is that speed kills. That's why the Action Committee for Transit is really excited about both these bills, and we are very thrilled that they are being put forward. We do have one, and there are some folks who will speak sort of much more eloquently than I about what this means for people's families and neighborhoods and their lives. I'm just going to take a slightly technical and wonky point on it, which is the question of traffic studies. We are urging that you delete the requirement of traffic studies. Unfortunately, most traffic engineers look at that and think that they are required to apply the 85th percentile rule, which says, let's look at all the people driving on this road. 15% of them are going, the fastest 50%, they're speeding, everybody else is okay. That's not really the way you want to set a speed limit. And as it happens, that noted agency of the war against cars, the Federal Highway Administration, has just come out with a guidance that says this is a myth. They instead recommend and suggest what they call the safe systems approach, which briefly, to quote them, says that the speed limit should be set according to the crash types that are likely to occur, the impact forces that result, and the human body's tolerance to withstand these forces. I don't know about you, but that's what I would want on the street where my family lives, plays, walks, rides the dog when the children bicker. I would also point out that a lot of these roads, the traffic studies, as we know, as you all know, take time, they take money. Are we really going to waste money collecting data on dead-end cul-de-sacs and how many cars go there? If we have money to spend on that, that's fine, but last I checked, things were a little tight. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Is Adrian McBride here?
I am here.
Adrian.
My name is Adrian McBride. I'm Vice President of Action for the League of Women Voters, Montgomery County, and thank you for hearing our testimony this evening. The Montgomery County League of Women Voters supports legislation that improves the coordination between county agencies and the state to enhance the quality of life for its residents. We believe that the bills 2217 and 2317 and the subsequent possibility of varied speed limits will help to make a safer community with better roads for all county residents, whether they are in a motorized vehicle, walking, or biking. As authorized bills only, these bills become another tool in the toolbox for transportation experts. Let us expand the analogy to a repair person's toolbox. Within every well-stacked toolbox, we find that there are a variety of screwdrivers with heads and sizes for multiple kinds of screws. I'm just going to skip over this analogy and just say that there's ongoing evaluation is the key to effective traffic management for all modes of transportation and safe streets. And as a county, we are endeavoring to increase walking and biking as forms of transportation, and we are concerned that our laws and policies should provide for the safety of all our residents. Modification of speed is one way the county can improve both the safety and increased environment comfort for all its citizens. The League of Women Voters of Montgomery County strongly encourages our legislative delegation to support Bills 2217 and 2317 in the Maryland State Legislature to enable flexibility in establishing appropriate speed limits. Let's be able to add another tool to our toolbox of safety.
Thank you. Is Christina Hartman here?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. My name is Christina Hartman, and I am here today to testify in support of authorizing Bills 2217 and 2317 introduced to lower speed limits and to advance Vision Zero for Montgomery County. I would like to see MC 2417 reintroduced, which would eliminate the requirement that Montgomery County conduct a traffic study before lowering the speed limits on county roads near public schools. In addition to being reintroduced, I'd like to see it expanded to include coverage of private schools and daycares. With my husband, Matt, I own a home in Bethesda at the corner of Green Tree Road and Grant Street. We live with our 2 young daughters, Sophie, age 5, and Charlotte, 5 months. Green Tree Road is used by many commuters as a shortcut from 270 to NIH in downtown Bethesda. During rush hour, the traffic has made crossing over Green Tree Road perilous for both drivers and pedestrians. There have been numerous accidents on our corner. Last month, I arrived home from after work with my infant daughter Charlotte in tow to find a car had run over the sidewalk, crashed through my fence, and into my yard, where it was stopped by a tree that my daughter Sophie frequently hides behind while playing with her dad after they get home. They arrived home about 15 minutes after the crash occurred. The police told me to forget the fence and get some boulders for my yard. I'm considering it, but I'm concerned that the boulders would do nothing for the pedestrians on the sidewalk. I would like to see lower speed limits on Green Tree Road, as well as other measures to calm the traffic. This is a residential road lined by houses, not a commuter thoroughfare. The intersection by my house and so many roads in Bethesda need to be re-engineered. And in neighborhoods and residential areas, the #1 engineering goal should be safety, not moving cars as quickly as possible. Our kids live here. We don't need any more studies to know something is dreadfully wrong with the traffic situation in Montgomery County. People are driving too fast and too aggressively, and as we all know, speed kills. Speed also maims a separate but critically important component of the problem not yet addressed by Vision Zero. As a mother, I implore you to take action and do whatever is necessary to lower the speed limits and calm the traffic throughout Montgomery County. Thank you.
Elena Mrzowski.
Hi, I am also mom of 3 kids. 4th is on the way, and I live on Green Tree Road, not far from Old Georgetown Road. We witnessed through the 10 years we've been living there, many accidents happened on those roads, and most of them due to the speeding. The signs that are put occasionally on Green Tree Road are ignored for the most part by most of the drivers. The thought that a car can crush into my front yard where my kids are playing as well, just like Christina's daughter was playing, is terrifying, because do we have to wait for a tragic accident to happen to speed up these measures? Unfortunately, many drivers treat Green Tree Road as a highway, although it's a residential road in a residential neighborhood where many families live with little kids. I imagine you have loved ones, kids, grandchildren, nieces, nephews who might be on that front yard, and God forbid something like Christina's accident would happen at the time the kids are playing. Unfortunately, it's only a matter of time for the tragedy to strike. I know that these things are not easy to put through, and there might be a lot of bureaucracy involved, but what can top the safety of my kids or Christina's kids or your kids? I don't understand. I'm asking you to support these two bills and to put forward measures calming the traffic on Green Tree Road as well as on other roads in our neighborhood to keep our kids and our citizens safe.
Laura Matney.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. My name is Laura Matney, and I'm one of the administrators at the Family Academy of Bethesda. We are a child care, daycare, Montessori school center. We have a capacity of 125 children. We have 4 houses along Montgomery Avenue, and we have been trying to get some traffic calming done by contacting the county. I was told yesterday that our requests have been denied because we're not a public school. We had requested speed bumps or flashing lights or something that we've seen near public schools. And so I was told about this hearing and asked to come and just give a few examples of why we are in support of this. Since the trail is going to be taken from us, we have the trail behind our all of our houses that we have enjoyed, and our children have used that trail. Now that they have started the initial stages of the construction, the county removed the bridge that we used to have for our children to get to the trail, and we then had to start using the sidewalks along the street to get to the playground and back every day. It was a frightening experience because walking the children, our children are 8 weeks up till age 6, and it is frightening to walk young children on a sidewalk that's that close to traffic, that's going that fast. And even though the speed limit on that road is currently 25, I would say most people probably go about 40, 45 down that road. And a few weeks ago, there was an accident in one of our parking lots that's right off the road. It was in the front, the parking lot in the front of our building. And that also sparked interest in doing something to get some traffic calming. Understanding that as the limit currently is 25 and people are going routinely 40, 45, if it could be lowered to 20, then any bit would help, because people are probably going to continue to go a little bit over what the limit is. So we join this request for any kind of traffic calming we can get.
Thank you. Marianne Cope, would someone make room for her, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm Miriam Cope. I am a citizen of Bethesda. I live in the Ashburton neighborhood. So today in my testimony, I want to quickly talk about our experience in Ashburton and why I support not just the 2 bills that are here, but also the reintroduction of the lifting the traffic calming study requirement. So Ashburton is bound by Old Georgetown Road and Democracy Road. I think it is consistently rated as the 3rd busiest intersection in Montgomery County. That even might be outdated with the new development at Rockville Town Center, and then also in North Bethesda near White Flint. We have walkers, young and old. We have Ashburton Elementary with 400 students that attend the school. We also have Wildwood Shopping Center nearby, Not Your Average Joe's Restaurant, which has a great burger, Westfield Mall. And importantly, and not discussed, I think, thus far, is we have a large proportion of neighbors who use the J2 bus stop to get to and from their work, as well as to NIH or other places with irregular hours where they're walking at night. I live actually on Lone Oak, and it's an incredibly busy area, and the situation is becoming dangerous as development has increased. People are cutting through. They pass a Montessori school, a daycare,
They will roll through our stop sign at Lone Oak, and then they'll get to the crossing guard at Ashburton, who is very brave. Then they continue to speed up to get to Fernwood, oftentimes to get to 270 or Westfield, Montgomery. I'd just like to end on this note, which is I think that the traffic calming measures that we all know about, speed bumps, signs, flashing lights, would really reduce the burden on our police department to try to deal with the traffic situation when in reality they have a lot of actual security situations that they have to deal with in the area. So just really supportive of this bill and hope you all consider reintroducing the other bill.
Okay, I don't see any questions. Thank you to the panel. Oh, I'm sorry, we do have a question. Senator Lee?
Yeah, I thank all the panelists for coming here today and staying so late at night. I know the area very well because I live close by, and I think both pieces of legislation are very common sense pieces of legislation to keep up with the current changes in population and the increase of pedestrian traffic. But along with this, and Mark, maybe you can answer this, when is a speed limit changes in like residential areas like this, and is there also what the latest speaker said about putting also like flashing lights there to kind of warn them that there is a change too, but also just awareness that they need to slow down?
Well, Senator, first of all, I was happy to stay this late for this panel, but I appreciate you saying that. So right now the county has those tools in the toolbox. The county can go in and do some flashers, speed bumps, sidewalks, different things like that. This is something that would be in addition to that. They come in and do these studies, and sometimes they find it appropriate to put in speed bumps, which also require a survey of the neighbors. Sometimes they don't. This would give them another option. Right now, I think most people are surprised to find out the county doesn't have this option on a county residential road. Right? We're used to them having no authority over state roads. This is a county residential road.
So they can do it simultaneously. They can lower the limit, but they also can put those other things in place too, like the flashing lights.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you to this panel. Sarah, thank you to this panel. Sarah Morningstar, you're signed up for both. Do you, me too. Okay. You're signed up with amendment, so okay. All right, that concludes the hearing on the two bills, 2217 and 2317. And we'll move on to 2617, law enforcement vehicles, defibrillators. Delegate Gutierrez will be represented by her aide, John Michael Gudger, and Mike Mage, and John, whoever. Okay, yes. Okay, this is MC 2617, John Michael Gudger for Delegate Gutierrez.
Hello, I'm John Michael Gudger. I'm representing Delegate Gutierrez, and on behalf of the delegate who can't be here, allow me to introduce MC 2617 that would require law enforcement vehicles to have automated external defibrillators while on patrol in Montgomery County. An automated external defibrillator, or AED, when properly attached to a person in sudden cardiac arrest, attempts to find a heartbeat and, if needed, delivers an electric shock to attempt to restore a normal heartbeat rhythm. Most AEDs are about the size of a small briefcase or a laptop. Currently, only certain jurisdictions have partial implementation of this idea. Howard County installed 50 AEDs in patrol cars in 2011. Additionally, all Maryland Transit Police vehicles patrolling Montgomery County are currently equipped with AEDs. Montgomery County Police have started to install AEDs, but at a schedule that will take 14 more years to finish the task. The moments after sudden cardiac arrest are absolutely critical, and for every minute that passes, the likelihood of survival decreases about 10%. Police are first responders trained in CPR and use of AEDs. CPR is simply the attempt of preservation of the individual until defibrillation is possible. The best chance of survival is a defibrillator on scene with the first responder. When there is a sudden cardiac arrest in custody, there is a constitutional Eighth Amendment obligation to have an AED because that is the only effective treatment. This bill requires a law enforcement vehicle used for patrol within Montgomery County to have an AED. It does not apply to law enforcement officers transiently present in Montgomery County. This bill should increase the survival rate of sudden cardiac arrest victims when police are first on the scene. It protects from costly settlements of death in custody federal civil rights. It protects from costly settlements of death in custody federal civil rights lawsuits. And I'm going to pass it over to my alliterative friend, Mr. Mike Mage.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mage.
Hi. Whoops. Hello. Yes, I'm Mike Mage. I've lived in the county for 64 years. I have niece and a nephew who are in fire and rescue and are familiar with sudden cardiac arrest. I have a cousin in the police force. Mr. Gudger has told you quite accurately why these are necessary. I will only reiterate that there is only one effective treatment, prompt defibrillation with a defibrillator, and time is of the essence. If the police are unequipped for immediate defibrillation, they are not providing essential care to the person in custody, and this violates the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution. Now, opponents of this bill have said it's not needed. Saving lives is not needed. Obeying the Constitution is not needed. They say it's an unfunded mandate that will cost the county money. What they don't say is the county will save money by avoiding lawsuits. For example, Mr. Anthony Howard died in custody after he was tasered in 2013. The Howard family is planning to sue. They've retained the same law firm that settled with Baltimore for $6.4 million in the Freddie Gray case. The county will be lucky if it gets off for $450,000, like the $450,000 they paid to Mr. Ali's family in 2014 after he was tasered and died. The opponents say fire and rescue get there as fast as the police. What they don't say is it took 16 minutes for fire and rescue to reach Mr. Howard, or that 12 police vehicles were there and none of them had an AED, or that it took 15 minutes for fire and rescue to reach Mr. Ali. They have started putting AEDs in police cars, but what they don't say is that the rate they're going, it will take 15 years to finish the job. I'm 82 years old, and I hope the job will be finished before I'm finished. In summary, the county can spend money to settle lawsuits, or it can spend it to save lives. Bill MC 2617 nudges them in the right direction. I urge you to please support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mage and Mr. Gudger. Any questions? No, thank you very much. In opposition, Sarah Morningstar with the county and Sergeant Kevin Parker.
Thank you very much. I'm Sarah Morningstar with Montgomery County. We've submitted a position statement in opposition to this bill, and I actually have Sergeant Parker next to me, and then also Captain Wall is here, who does our legislative liaison work, but mostly to answer any questions that the delegation may have about this bill.
Delegate Ludke.
Just a very quick question because I'm unclear based on the bill text, but would this apply just to MCP or would it also apply to the municipal police departments, WSSC, park and planning police? I mean, right.
Yeah, the way the bill's written, it would apply to all the law enforcement agencies in 3101, which includes, for us, the state police, all the municipalities, Gaithersburg City, Rockville City, Tacoma Park, Chevy Chase. It would apply to the Sheriff's Department in Montgomery County, Metro Transit, Park Police, Department of Natural Resources Police.
So it's a much bigger impact than we've even discussed in previous years. Thank you.
Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask the police officers, my understanding when we had almost the exact same bill 4 or 5 years ago, that the opposition was mainly cost, that if you had the extra money, there would be other things you'd rather spend that money on to support our public safety in our county. And I just wanted you to address that point.
We certainly value AEDs and the AED program, but we do have many other important funding priorities for important equipment, programs, training, staffing. We do have 209 AEDs right now in the police department, spread out in all 6 of our districts over all shifts, all work shift hours, day shift, evening shift, midnight. So they are spread out and available in all areas of the county. We have, like I said, 209 assigned to officers and vehicles. We have 14 of those are in facilities. So the remainder, 195 currently are available in the districts for use for incidents that occur. And we are committed to funding 50 additional AEDs every year. We have that funding in for FY18. One of the things to note is that the AEDs have an 8-year life cycle. So they need to be replaced also. We currently have funding in addition to the 50 for FY18. We have additional funding to replace 28 that are currently 8 years or more older. That amounts to an additional $51,000 for FY18. So there is a fiscal impact. It is a priority, balanced with other priorities in the police department. And we do have a number of AEDs spread out currently.
Delegate Frazier Hidalgo.
Thank you. One of the questions, kind of a more technical question, because you see this on TV all the time, so I wanted to just get some clarification. Does the AED help to restore someone if there's no heartbeat at all and they're flatlined, or does it just help to reset an existing heartbeat that might be out of rhythm, just for clarificational purposes?
My name's Kevin Parker. I'm the sergeant of our emergency services unit. We're a multi-mission unit, so among our responsibilities, we're the tactical medics for our tactical team, and our unit manages this program, the AED program for the department. So to answer your question, the AED looks for a specific rhythm. If they're flatline or asystole, like you mentioned, it would not perform a shock and it would not be of any benefit to that patient. It's looking for a specific rhythm.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions. No, I do. Delegate Collison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are these AEDs, are they something that's portable that can be taken out of the unit, or is it something that has to stay in the unit?
Yes, they're portable, as was previously mentioned. They're about the size of a briefcase.
Okay. And you have 195 of them now?
209 total, 14 are in facilities, the rest are deployed in vehicles assigned to officers.
So what percentage of the vehicles do you think they're in now?
Well, we have 189 assigned to actual individual officers, and we have 1,200 officers.
1,200, okay, so like 10% or so. So if these can be portable, can't they be used at different shifts? Can't they be, traded off so that a single unit actually can have more utilization? Has there been any discussion about how to make maximum use of the ones you have?
So we did discuss that when we initially developed the program. The reason we to individual officer issue is because of how critical the piece of equipment is. Issues like maintenance, maintaining the pads are actually applied to the patient, and the batteries, making sure those two items are not expired, that the unit is inspected on a certain monthly basis, so that in that moment of need for that patient, 100% of the time our AEDs are going to work, and they've not been neglected, and they're not going to fail us. So that's why we've not done a fleet format, is for that reason.
So just so I'm clear, so each individual officer who has one is responsible for the
Correct.
upkeep and care of the unit?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, thank you. And that concludes the hearing on 2617. Mr. Chairman, back to you.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on to the Metro Washington Area Committee bills chaired by Delegate Al Carr, but he has the first bill, so I'd like to call him up for MCPG 10117. Delegate.
May I have the other supporters and support with amendments come up with?
Sure, of course. I'd like to call up Ting Mei Chow, Gordy Bren, Peter Kim, Karen Riley, and Paul Grenier. And since we're starting the WSSC bills, let me just recognize T. Eloise Foster, who is a MoCo WSSC commissioner. She's sitting in the back, and she was former state budget secretary. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I'm Delegate Al Carr, and I'm here to present MCPG 101-17. And what this bill does is it is enabling legislation, and it would give WSSC greater flexibility in setting its rates and creating a rate structure. For example, WSSC could have different rate classes for residential customers versus non-residential customers, or they could have different rate structures by the size of the meter, like the city of Rockville does. And what this bill is about really is it's to bring WSSC into the mainstream of the industry practice. It is very common for municipal water and sewer utilities to have a different rate structure for different classes. There are hundreds of water and sewer utilities around the country that have this, that use this authority, and there are many more that have this authority but choose not to use it. For example, the District of Columbia has different rates for residential versus non-residential customers. The city of Annapolis has the same thing, and many other jurisdictions in the region. What is not common in the industry is the status quo. WSSC's current rate structure, while well-intentioned, it was devised in the 1970s, and it's outlived its usefulness. There is no other municipal water and sewer company in the entire United States that has a rate structure like this. We have a judge from the Maryland Public Service Commission that has ruled that the rate structure is unreasonable, and there's a growing consensus by WSSC, by the county councils, to move towards a new rate structure. So this bill is really about putting all options on the table. We have our experts. WSSC that's our water and sewer company. They're the experts. They have a lot of talented people. They should have all the same abilities and authorities as many other in their industry do. And again, it's enabling, so it doesn't cause anything to happen in terms of different rate classes, but it just makes that a possibility for WSSC. The bill is supported by Montgomery County, by WSSC with a clarifying amendment, and
I ask for your favorable report.
Delegate, do you have an order that you'd like your panel to go in, or should I just go down the list?
Okay, how about May?
Nice to see you again.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Boy, you guys have such a difficult job because all night I've been listening to all those issues and I was like, wow, I would never want to be sit up there and listen. So thank you to you all.
Could you state
my
your
name is Ting Mei Chow.
Thank you.
I live in Clarksburg and I'm the District 30. I think I have District 39. So Shane and Charles, and then the new one. I don't know how to pronounce the name, but and then also Susan Lee. I'm very familiar, but I just use the time to say thank you, and I'll already present the argument. I've been actually get involved with WSSC since 2011, so it's been 6 years, just on and off, and get to the rate issues and look at the rate structures. I think this bill would give WSSC a great flexibility when they think about reforming the rate. And I think it is time, and don't to be delayed since so many years already passed, that I urge you guys to support the bill and move it forward to make that reform happen, and then happen in a way very reasonably, and have different class of the structure, and then also fair for everybody. So that's all my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Gordy Brenny. I'm Vice President of the Montgomery County Taxpayers League and an accountant. And it's almost my bedtime, so I'm going to be quick. We support restructuring the WSSC volumetric rates to provide for different classes of customers, as long as this is tied to stronger cost controls and achieving competitive rates. WSSC is the largest monopoly in the state. We rely on you to protect us from monopoly rents and assure reliable service. The obvious reason we're talking tonight is the judgment against the current billing structure. But the underlying economics of the business are the real challenge in developing an effective pricing strategy. One, volumetric rates rose in the last 10 years at an annual rate of 6.63%. That's 3 times the CPI. This is because of poor cost controls. In addition, fees for customer service and infrastructure maintenance were added last year to fortify revenues, but they'll undermine cost control incentives in those areas. Number 2, WSSC is fat and inefficient. The benchmarking study completed last summer cited inefficient practices in 3 areas key to service reliability: utility, services, fleet management, and asset management CIP. These 3 areas contribute to productivity weaknesses, resulting in growing fixed costs, and are key to bringing costs and rates under control. This is where the cost of replacing pipes must be controlled with a plan that's independently audited. The report also said WSSC has too many overhead employees in management, IT, engineering, and construction. 3, WSSC operates on a cost-plus contract basis. They spend more, we pay more. There are no incentives. I repeat, there are no incentives in the budgeting and rate-setting process to control costs. Why not? Well, there's a state law that requires the county councils to agree on changes to the proposed budget or adopt the requested budget as a default. Sounds crazy. No public service commission in the country requires this. And the law all but guarantees higher rates and higher costs, including the excessive 4.5% salary cost increase last year. One restructuring objective is to achieve net revenue neutral rates, but that can only happen if new cost controls are implemented. Without adequate controls, costs will continue to rise, making revenue neutrality an unreachable goal. Family rates are already 34% higher than Fairfax County and 69% higher for small businesses. Our families are disadvantaged, and we could be losing business opportunities and jobs because of this. The bill should be expanded to require an independent audit of cost controls every 5 years, competitiveness with neighboring county rates, and elimination of the state law compelling a default budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Peter Kim. I'm a Germantown resident, and I own 2 laundromats in the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission service area. I have 1 laundromat in Prince George's Counties in Laurel, and I have one laundromat in Montgomery County in Silver Spring. Yeah, basically I'm here because about a year ago, a group of laundromat owners, we kind of got together and said, hey, our water costs are going up too dramatically. In the last 10 years, my water rates have gone up about 75%. So my $7,000, $8,000 a month water bill now is, over $10,000, $12,000, $13,000 a month. So not a quarter, a month. So it's very high for me. Basically, the customers that I serve are mid to lower income folks that live in apartments. Yes, they can do their laundry in their apartment complex in the shared space, but it's not efficient for them to do that. So they come to my laundromat with my water efficient machines. They can spend an hour and a half, 2 hours to finish their laundry instead of spending all day doing their laundry on the weekend, fighting with other tenants. So basically, as I got kind of involved in this, I got invited to this WSSC stakeholders representative group to talk about the water rate. It's extremely complex. It was created, decades ago. It doesn't fit our needs for today, for residential or commercial. I'm definitely speaking on behalf of commercial users. I know that I use the highest rate, the highest usage, on the water bill. If you look at that highest rate if you ever looked at it, it's gone up for about $10 a 1,000 gallons to today it's $18.71 per 1,000 gallons. And every year it goes up, 6%, 7%, 8%, 3%, that hits me. So it directly affects, how I can pay my employees, how I can make improvements to my stores, that sort of thing. So, basically I understand with my interactions with WSSC that this bill would be a tool that could help them, help me, whether it creates a different type of rate structure for commercial entities, for users, for laundromat entities, because I'm basically an aggregate of individual users. If I'm a family doing my laundry at home, my rate is going to be substantially lower. In today's rates, about $10, $11 a 1,000 gallons. But because I'm aggregating, hundreds of users every week, now my rate is 71 cents per 1,000 gallons. So it's really, I'm not using that much water. It's all of my customers aggregate individually are using that much water. If I'm a large manufacturer like, Pepsi Cola or US Navy, they're a large organization using a lot of water. But really, I'm a aggregate of individual users. So, what I'm asking for is, giving WSSC the tools to basically be able to create, rates that are in line with the types of business or the types of uses that exist today, such as myself, a laundromat. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Karen Riley. I'm the Director of Intergovernmental Relations for WSSC. I wanted to also acknowledge Commissioner Foster, who's stayed with us all night, and also let you all know that yesterday we actually had a special commission meeting so that we could present our official positions to you on the pieces of legislation that are before you this evening. We are in support with amendment of this bill because it is enabling legislation as we undergo our rate study and we try to determine what is the best rate structure for our customers. We need to have the flexibilities to be able to examine and implement a variety of different rate structures. So this is just enabling legislation that allows us to do those things in the best interest of our customers. Our clarifying amendment comes courtesy of our General Counsel's office. The intent behind Delegate Carr's amendment is, of course, to allow us to create different classes and charge based on consumption, not meter sizes. So what the clarifying amendment does is it explains that we do not have the discretion to solely charge on a meter size. We have the discretion to charge on the consumption based on the meter size. So that's what the clarifying amendment that we're asking for. So we do hope that you all will give us a favorable report on our amendment.
Delegate Resnick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just for clarity's sake, in District 39, Delegate Robinson's the new guy. But please don't go before, because I'd like to say hello.
Thought I was going to get away with it. Delegate Kaiser.
Delegate Carr, hearing what WSSC had to say about their clarifying amendment, do you support that?
Yes, I do.
Delegate Kramer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Carr, I think there are two separate issues that have been at the heart of the problem with WSSC, well, actually one issue, but your bill creates two different ones. The first has been the policy of the rate structure at WSSC to charge a higher rate based on greater volume used, and that rate is charged going back to the very first drop of water used once you're in this higher category of use. That has been the source of the complaints that I have heard time and time again with regard to the rate structure that WSSC has in place. However, if I understand your bill correctly, this would be creating an opportunity to have new customer classes, and as you indicated, a business might be paying more than a home, which then begs the question, does it cost more to put water through a pipe to a business than it does to put water through to a home? And if in fact WSSC were to elect to charge a higher rate class-wise to a business, would Mr. Kim, who's here testifying in support of this bill, actually be paying more as a consequence of WSSC adopting a policy of charging more money per gallon to send that water to a business than to send it to a home? And I believe Mr. Kim had said he was paying 71 cents per 1,000 gallons. What if
1871.
Okay. What if that were to be doubled because it's going to a business as opposed to a residence? Would that not, if I understand correctly, your bill allow that kind of circumstance? And if so, is there anything that has ever been shown that it costs more money to put water through a pipe to a restaurant or to a store than it does to put water through a pipe to a house?
Yeah, so just to respond to you, Delegate Kramer. So yeah, again, this is enabling legislation. It just puts WSSC on par with its peer utilities and having the flexibility to choose a rate structure that's appropriate. It doesn't mandate that they go in any particular direction.
I understand.
But it just allows them. Let me
the
answer you, please.
authority.
Can I answer you, please?
But can they adopt
May I answer
an
you,
authority?
please, Delegate?
Yeah, please.
Let me finish.
Go ahead.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
So they can have all the options on the table and look at the different choices. I think what penalizes a lot of businesses is the current rate structure, where you have, as you stated, as you use more, you go into a higher tier, but that tier is not incremental. It goes back to the very first drop. So you have a business like Mr. Kim's, which is automatically kicked to the very highest rate. So that's sort of like having a high usage commercial rate now, but it's not done in a very transparent way. It's done in a way that is sort of pretending to be a single rate for everybody, but it's bumping up these certain customers who are conserving, but are paying the very highest rates. And so WSSC is going through this process with stakeholders to talk about, with their consultant, different options for rate structures. They're also doing a cost to service study, so I think there will be some guidance that the commission, our experts on water and sewer, can look at as they figure out what is the cost of service for different types of customers. Are there different characteristics or conditions that would drive the cost up or down based on different customers' usage pattern, to inform them as they come up with a new rate structure, and can inform the county councils too, as they would have to, and the public who would have to agree to changes.
All right, then can I go back to my original question, because I don't think it's been answered, but thank you for that very thorough explanation. My question to you is simply, under the language of this bill, can Mr. Kim, if WSSC acts to do so, be charged more because he is operating a business per gallon of water than someone in a house? Just that's a simple yes or no. Under under the language of this bill, is that a potential outcome?
Well, I mean, if you look at the rates, if you get a chance, go and Google DC water rates. Take a look at the.
I'm not interested in DC
Take a look at the water and
rates,
sewer rates in the
Delegate
District
Carr.
of Columbia, where a lot of laundromats operate too, and there is a slightly different rate for non-residential versus residential. That's probably the more likely scenario of what would happen, possibly under this bill. What other utilities actually do, not what they theoretically might astronomically raise a rate even higher.
So then what you're saying is, under this bill, it's very likely businesses in Montgomery County will pay more for water than
No,
residential users.
that was not my answer.
I thought you just said in the District of Columbia, you have non-residential users paying higher than residential users, and that's likely what would happen. That's exactly what I heard,
Well,
sir.
I would urge you to take a look at the rates in the District of Columbia and then make up your own mind.
Thank you for that. Mr. Kim, it's up to the chairman to decide if you may ask a question, sir.
Sure, quickly, and then we have two more questions from members.
Well, a residential user would never pay the rate that I pay because they would never use more than 9,000 gallons average daily consumption.
I understand based on volume.
Sure.
But you may be paying more now. You'll still be using your 9,000 gallons, sir.
Sure.
But if you're paying 10 cents a gallon now under this bill because you're a business, you'll be having that 9,000 gallons and potentially paying 30 cents a gallon. Do you follow what I'm saying? In other words, because you're a business, under this bill, what you pay per gallon may go up as opposed to everybody else. And my question is there any reason to believe that putting water into your business will cost WSSC more to justify than putting water into a residence? And I haven't had an answer to that. Does it cost more water to put it through a pipe to your business? But my guess is, under this bill, you'll be paying more money than you are now, sir.
I mean, in the stakeholders representative group, the consultants, Black and Beach, I mean, they presented 4 options for different rates. They did explain the cost of study, the cost of service, that it's not actually the amount of usage, but the amount of usage within a certain time period. So they actually said the aggregate of residential users taking a shower in the morning actually costs more to service than a business like mine that runs continuously throughout the
But
day.
do you think that'll be the outcome, that the house is going to pay more, the residents will pay more than you, or do you believe that as a business, you're likely to be the one paying more? If WSSC is given the opportunity to bill you more as a business?
I can't pretend to know what the legislation, how it's written and how it works, but from my interactions with WSSC and especially as part of the stakeholders representatives group, I don't believe that they would, put me over the coals.
Thank you for that.
Ms. Chow, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, it's a simple thinking about the bill that Mr. Kramer asked, that because of the 2 class, so we automatically assume the consumer class would be higher than the residents. I think we have to wait until that play out. It might be possible. There's the 2 ways. It might be one is higher than the other, but it also could be the other is higher than the other one. So resident or commercial, I don't think that we can automatically assume that's all.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move on to Delegate Queen, please.
Hi, thank you for your testimony. Just a question for me, just for clarification. So is Washington, D.C. the only WSSC area that has this sort of class structure now, or are there others we can draw from?
We had the Department of Legislative Services obtain the most recent water survey of hundreds of water and sewer utilities across the country. So for the utilities that reported how they charge for water and sewer, there were 129 that did have different rate structures for residential versus non-residential. So it's very common in the industry, and there were 155 that answered that had the same rates for residential versus non-residential. And then some of these had different structures altogether. Some of them would have a uniform rate on the residential side, a gallon is a gallon is a gallon, and then on the commercial side, they'd have rates that change as your consumption changes, and then some have the opposite. So, certain rate structure might work really well for a residential customer, but might not be appropriate for a non-residential customers.
Sure, but for WSSC in our local area, is Washington DC the only area that kind of has a structure now that we can draw from? Because what I'm trying to get to, I think, is the question.
The question of this bill is who has the authority? What this bill does, it doesn't cause WSSC to have
they don't
rate
have
classes.
to implement
It just gives them the authority.
I understand
And I
that.
believe it's likely that all the surrounding jurisdictions have the authority. We would just be putting them on par with their peers in the region and in the nation to have the authority.
Okay.
And leave it up to them.
So I guess the other question would be, though, if we move to this consumption versus meter size approach, do we have any sort of information about, does that increase or increase the residents' bill?
Well, again, we're not moving to any different rate structure. We're just giving WSSC the flexibility to choose what they want. So were they to choose a different rate structure for residential versus non-residential, if you look at the examples from around the country, there are many different ways it's done out there.
Sure, but our concern would be the impact to consumers, so I'm trying to get a sense of that.
Okay.
So do we have anything we can draw from
We have the study that's in the Legislative Services Library. We're glad to share that with you
Okay,
if you want
that'd
to
be
see what
helpful.
other utilities do.
Thank you.
Delegate Corman, and then we'll move on to the opposition.
I'm really sorry to detract from Delegate Kramer's time, but Delegate Carr, maybe this is a question for you, maybe to WSSC, but I want to understand a little bit. When we pay our WSSC bill, what are we paying for? Because I'm hearing a lot about the water we use, the hookup to our house, but there's a whole network of infrastructure behind that, right? Water mains, feeders, all sorts of stuff. WSSC every year comes to Annapolis and gives us a presentation about how many miles they're replacing a year versus what they need, the huge backlog. We're talking about that's what our bill is paying for. Is that a correct understanding?
That's right. It's infrastructure.
Okay, so the issue is, how do we replace, and maybe you have some of the stats about the backlog on infrastructure replacement, how do we replace and maintain all that existing infrastructure? I'm asking your colleague from WSSC.
I will be blunt in saying I am limited in what I can speak on our service rates because we're in active litigation. But I will say, when you pay your water bill, you are paying for infrastructure. You have your infrastructure fee, you have a ready-to-serve fee, and you have your consumption. So it's not just the actual water. There is a system, as you referenced, that does need to be maintained. We're under a consent decree for our sewer rehabilitation and repair. So there is a broader impact.
Okay, well, I wouldn't want you to run the risk of running into any litigation trouble, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay, hearing no more questions, I'd like to thank the panel and invite up Ron Weinhold from AOBA, signed up as opposed. Welcome. It should be there. There you go. No, not yet. There you go.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the delegation. I'm Ron Weinhold with the Apartment and Office Building Association of Metropolitan Washington. We are opposed to MCPG 10117. You have my written statement of opposition. I would make a couple of points, some of which have been touched on by some of the questions. This is a big deal for businesses. Businesses, as you can imagine, pay a lot in water bills, and water and sewer bills. And it is not for purposes of meeting new infrastructure needs, Delegate Corman. It's a question of having a revenue-neutral structure that slices the pie in a different way in terms of allocating the charges among the customers. If somebody pays more, someone pays less, someone else is going to be picking up the slack and paying more. And if you go to a significantly different rate structure, there's going to be a whole lot of cost shifts from one customer to another. The problem that Delegate Kramer pointed out, the way that the current rate structure is a problem by charging at the highest rate for every drop of water used. You don't need this bill to solve that problem. You can have among the current 16 rates a different rate for each bracket, and that rate applying within that bracket. You don't need this bill to solve that. In fact, most jurisdictions in the area don't have classified rates. You've heard reference to D.C. However, Baltimore City area systems for water and sewer, Arlington, Anne Arundel, Fairfax, Howard counties, cities of Alexandria and Frederick City do not use classified rates. Our neighboring jurisdictions don't use this type of system. If you look in D.C. or other jurisdictions that do use it, what you see is always higher rates for business customers. There's no mystery on that. And if you look at the materials that were provided to the stakeholders group, which I participated in, WSSC, I'm very pleased to be able to participate in that. It's no mystery what the outcome would be. They presented 4 options from the consultant, and 2 of the 4 options would have classified rates. Option number 3, 1 rate for residential for everybody for every gallon used, 1 rate for non-residential for every gallon used. Guess what? The residential rate is $11.45 per thousand. The non-residential rate, $17.98. So if you have small business customer currently paying at roughly $8, $9, $10 per thousand, they're going to $18 per thousand. That's an increase of 80% to 230% for small business customers. That's going to give you, I think, a whole lot of complaints from business customers, cause political turmoil, and is not needed to solve the problem. That's why we oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Delegate Carr.
Thank you. So, good evening, Mr. Weinhold.
Good evening.
So you represent apartment and office building owners, and so is it fair to say that AOBA is content with the current rate structure?
I think it's a good case to be made for changing the current rate structure. And we have customers, honestly, on both ends of the scale, because obviously commercial customers are going to be using high volume at the high end of the brackets. Multifamily properties more often use the unit count method, whereby you take the total usage for the meter divided by the number of apartment units per day, so you are closer down to the resident, well, I call it the lower volume scale. So we have lower volume customers in our membership and high volume customers in membership. Our concern is if you reshuffle the deck, nobody knows how it's going to play out, other than the likelihood that business is going to pay a higher rate still.
Okay. So in your testimony, you said, we believe that rates should be based on the volume of water used. But from what you just said, it sounds like apartment building owners aren't built that way. You said that for apartment building owners, their average daily consumption gets divided by the number of units in the apartments, so they end up paying them on a much lower tier. Is that what you said?
That's a method that's been allowed by WSSC for a long time to put residential tenants on essence the same scale as homeowners, so that the tenants who typically have about half the household income as owner-occupied properties in Montgomery County, so that they are not charged at high volume rates relative to owner-occupied properties.
So you're not just charged, for those type of properties, you're not just charged based on the volume of water used. There are other factors, such as the number of units that get factored in, correct?
It's based on the volume of water used. It's not based on who you are. It's based on the volume of water used.
Okay.
By that unit.
Okay. And a hospital doesn't get a break like that. They don't get to divide their usage by the number of hospital rooms they have, or a brewery wouldn't get to divide by the number of, customers that they serve. So that this is a special rate or a special system that tends to benefit the multifamily properties, correct?
It puts the tenants on the same level playing field with other residential customers.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Just in case
Delegate
Corman
Kramer.
had something to ask, I want to make sure I utilize that time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, just so we are very clear on this, it is your assessment, were this bill to pass, it is very likely that business will be paying more per gallon of water than they are today. And my good friend, Mr. Kim, who was sitting there, who's already upset with what he pays, very likely will be paying more money. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome anytime, Delegate. Seeing no more questions, that ends the bill hearing, and we'll move on to MCPG 10217. Delegate Carr. Would you like to bring up
That's why I don't need
Karen Riley as well?
Yes, I would.
This will keep me from asking if I leave. Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Al Carr. I'm here to present MCPG 10217. And what this bill does is it just updates the section of law for WSSC in the Public Utilities article. There's language that talks about discrimination for WSSC employees and also for certain contractors of WSSC. And so the goal here is just to bring the language in that section of law into conformance with anti-discrimination language in other parts of the state law. So it currently talks about you can't discriminate based on sex, race, creed, color, age, mental or physical disability, and sexual orientation. And what we would be adding to mirror other parts of the state code is religion, marital status, and gender identity. Thank you.
Ms. Riley.
Thank you. Again, Karen Riley, Director of Intergovernmental Relations for WSSC. We support this bill. This bill just basically extends our anti-discrimination practices and brings us in alignment, as the delegate said, with existing state law. Our anti-discrimination practices are enumerated in our code, so this is just aligning it for both our employees, our contractors, and our subcontractors.
Thank you. And nobody signed up in opposition. Are there any questions? Seeing none, that ends the bill hearing. Thank you very much. And I'll turn it over to Delegate Carr, who can handle the last two bills of the evening.
Okay, thank you. So the next bill on our list is MCPG 104-17, Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission System Development Charge Exemptions, requested by Delegate Moon and Lukey and presented by Delegate Lukey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just by way of background, the system development charge is a charge that WSSC uses to help pay for infrastructure expansion. It's charged on new water hookups or expanded water hookups, so if they need a larger meter or an additional main or something. There is, in the existing law, an opportunity for exemptions, partial or full exemptions from the system development charge for specific classes of property up to $500,000 a year per county. So both Montgomery and Prince George's can do up to $500,000 a year. If it's not all used, it carries over into future years. We never use all of it, so Montgomery County has somewhere upwards of $6 million in accrued exemptions that they're not using. Currently, the system development charge can be exempted for revitalization projects, retirement developments, elderly housing, and biotech research, development, and manufacturing. This bill would restore a potential exemption for what's a community-based organization that's a 501c3 with a primary mission and purpose of providing recreational, educational programs and services to youth. That was briefly in the code, but sunset a few years back. Two new classes of property are included in this legislation: property used primarily for child care or after-school care, or property used for distillery, brewery, or winery. And that's the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Ilya Hopkins from the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce, and Karen Riley from WSSC. Who would like to go first?
Mine will be really quick. Thanks to all of you for hanging in there for 2 nights this week. It's important that we all have a chance to weigh in on all of these. And thank you to Delegates Moon and Ludke for proposing these important exemptions to the system development charge. We support this legislation, MCPG 104-17. As you know, the Montgomery County Chamber focuses on accelerating the success of our members, and much attention has been given to the fact that our local economy will benefit from greater diversification. A new industry that has gained a lot of traction and is quite popular is the making it local, craft brewing, distilleries, wineries, and we believe that this is an important showing of support for diversifying our local economy. Particularly in the craft brewing and winery and distillery business, the startup costs are pretty significant, and the capital it's capital intensive as they get going, and it takes a while to get the product made. So any kind of way to help as they're getting going, particularly when there is money already in this pot of money that has accrued. So therefore, an exemption from the system development charge seems reasonable and is an important way to support the growth and success of businesses in this sector. Thank you.
Again, good evening. Karen Riley for WSSC. We actually support this bill with an amendment. We recommend 2 things under that amendment. We understand that the bill sponsors have indicated that the exemptions for distilleries, breweries, and wineries will spark economic development and growth throughout Montgomery County. We know we have a key part of driving economic growth in both of the counties that we serve. But expanding exemptions to include businesses of this nature may open the door for other businesses to seek similar exemptions in the future. The other proposed exemptions, the child care and youth services, are rooted in alleviating SCC charges for properties that address socioeconomic issues and could lead to greater access to child care and youth services. So for that reason, we would like that part of the bill to be amended. We also recommend that the amendment include a sunset clause of July 30th, 2020 that mirrors with the sunset clause, a 3-year sunset clause that was in the prior legislation, and that legislation sunset this year. The clause terminated this year. So we want to be able to for the counties to have the ability to look back to see whether or not the exemptions are worth it and not be permanent in nature. So we do ask that you all issue a favorable report to support with amendment.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? Delegate Resnick?
Just for clarity, Delegate Lutke, I just want to make sure I understand. So there's a charge that certain ratepayers are charged for system development. There are some groups that are exempted from it. We want to add to it because this fund is never used.
So yes, there is a charge for new hookups and for expanded hookups. That's the charge we're talking about. It's not an automatic exemption. There's a process, an application process that people have to apply for the exemption, and it's never fully used. I think these specific classes of properties were included here for obvious reasons, right? On the one hand, we have a shortage of childcare, and we want to encourage low-cost childcare. And on the other hand, there's an existing class for biotech. And we're, since the new growth industry, one of the new growth industries in the county is brewing and distilling, it makes some sense for them to be included.
Okay, so I think I was confused, and I think you just cleared it up. So what you're saying is that a lot of the exemptions are not used. I was under the impression that the money itself was not used, and it just sits there.
The money is used.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That clarifies it.
Any other questions? So I just had one question is, so the system development charge, it's for new, and it pays for growth. So now, I just want to throw this out there as an idea, and so you can let me know later or now, but do you think it would make sense to, as a condition of getting this exemption on the system development charge, to have an entity who gets this exemption in their new project, their new construction or whatever, to agree to use the most efficient in terms of the use of water for their, plumbing fixtures or whatever they can do to make the best use of their water resources.
I'd want to confer with Delegate Moon before responding to that. I think it's a good discussion to have. I would point out that breweries and distilleries and wineries tend to, by their nature, do their best to conserve water because it's one of their largest expenses. Many breweries and wineries will donate their leftover mash to farmers who use it as animal feed. Some breweries will recycle water that's been used in early parts of the process in their cooling and heating systems. So these tend to be businesses that are exemplary in terms of water conservation.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. So the final bill of the evening is MCPG 105-17, Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, Prince George's County appointment procedures. And we have Mr. Tony Perez representing the Prince George's County Council, who has signed up to testify in support.
And I'll be brief, and you'll move it? Okay, all right. Well, good evening, yes. Okay, is that the, okay. Good evening, delegation. Thanks for being patient, and thank you for what you do. This bill is, I'm here in support of PGMC 105-17. Representing the Prince George's County Council. This bill is a bill that came before Prince George's last year, I'm watching, absolutely. And this bill basically will change the appointment and procedures for the members of the Maryland National Park and Planning Commission, and the council will now have input on those appointments. You have my written testimony, and like I said, if the county, did I get there? Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks. No, I appreciate your time and your patience. You guys are strong. I was here Monday night. You guys did a great job with managing all this. I had to take those extra seconds for that. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you very much.
It's good to see you, Tony. Thanks. And that ends the evening. Thanks, everyone. We are adjourned.
Happy holidays. Thank you.